sometimes. Can I ask you something? Do you really like working on Kane stuff?
You really like busting people?
Yeah. I bust frauds, I bust phonies. I love it.
Have you ever busted anyone you know?
Yeah, I tried it. Don't make any difference. See, in my business, you soon find out that everybody's capable of anything. Think of it, they've done it.
Doesn't leave you much to believe in.
Yeah, but think of the upside. It doesn't leave you too much to be disappointed in either. The sooner we're off the planet, the better.
Now you sound like Kane. You really like busting people?
I bust frauds, I bust phonies. I love it. Soon find out that everybody's capable of anything. Think of it, they've done it.
Doesn't leave you much to believe in.
Yeah, but think of the upside. At least it doesn't leave you too much to be disappointed in either. The sooner we're off the planet, the better.
Now you sound like Kane.
No, not me. You're the Kane lover.
Let's go. Yo, that was my friend Rooks G with Operation Neptune. What's going on, everybody? Tonight we're covering Black Mirror. We're going to talk about a bunch of Black Mirror episodes. Black Mirror. The new season is out, and I watched the new season, and it seems like I watched the new season, so a bunch of y'all don't have to, because I don't know what people feel about Black Mirror, but I thought the new season was good. I thought it was really good, and so there's a lot of analysis on season 1 and season 2 especially. So I'm trying to focus on this episode here of our stream at Bazed Lit Analyzer. Please smash that like and hit that subscribe button and hit that bell. We're going to cover especially Demon 79. Joan is awful. We're going to talk a little bit about Beyond the Sea and a couple other ones from the new season. I'm also going to talk about Smithereens from the previous season, and then the film that came out, Bandersnatch, which is good. And then I'm going to talk about a little bit about the movie BRAINSCAN, which came out in 1983, because it ties in with the gamification theme that goes on. So let's just start with what we're going to do is basically I'm just going to take you off the top of the dome here, straight from the top of the dome. I'm going to take you through random episodes. I'm not going to go in any kind of sequence, and we're going to talk about some of the themes. We've been watching a lot of films lately. I mean, I'm doing a class right now. I'm running a class right now on decoding Hollywood, decoding films, and I watched 2001: A Space Odyssey yesterday. As I mentioned in my friend Maddie's stream last night, I watched it again for the millionth time yesterday, and noticed a couple things in the movie. So for one thing, I never noticed that this is just random, but kind of setting it up because Beyond the Sea sort of deals with these themes. And so why is the light making my neck do that weird thing? That's really weird. So let me turn this light off. So one thing, it's making me look like I have extra veins in my neck. So one thing about 2001 is that when Dave is in the pod, and by the way, there's a character named David in Beyond the Sea. Um, So when Dave is in the pod and open the pod bay doors, Hal, right? Also, there's a character named David in Prometheus, and I think there's a Dave. Does Fat Damon play David in The Martian? There's always a David. So when Dave is in the pod and he's going out to fetch Frank, I never noticed before the screens because I said this on Maddie's stream last night. I tend to think of like I want my car to look like it has a lot of like a cockpit of a spaceship. That's what I imagine, having a car, like the ultimate, like the Audi that won the Cannonball race. I think I'm not like a car guy or anything, but I think that's really cool. It's like very vaporwave at night when you're driving. So I was looking at the screens, in the pod, and I never noticed that 3 of the messages that pop up include LOL, OMG, and meme. And I think that that's probably, it's obviously purposeful. It's a Kubrick film, but I think it's odd because there's so much revelatory and predict. There's so much there's so many predictive elements in 2001: Space Odyssey, and this is so strange. But Jethro, our friend Jethro out there, sent me a meme today of a screenshot of the ape in 2001. Hoisting the bone over his head. He's about to smash the bones. Remember for that first scene, which is the exploring, using tools. If you look at 2001 as some sort of Darwinian, movie talking about the Great Leap Forward and the missing link. Well, the same sort of scene occurs in, of all movies, There Will Be Blood. And actually, so I went back and watched There Will Be Blood today, Paul Thomas Anderson's 2007 film, and there are many correlations between the character Daniel Plainview in There Will Be Blood and 2001: A Space Odyssey. I'd never noticed it before because when he at the end of the film when he hoists the when he's holding the bowling pin and he's about to kill Eli Sunday, right? Paul Dano's character at the end of the film. Spoiler, no, you know that happens in the movie. Um, it's the same sort of thing. And in fact, what I realized about There Will Be Blood is I've always looked at it trying to figure out what the sort of a major through line in terms of the worldview in the movie. And I guess I just realized that it resembles more than anything Frank Norris's McTeague. And I think that the film is trying to depict a kind of early 20th century naturalistic, social Darwinian element where, again, I mean, it's also dealing with ancient stuff. He's pulling oil, right, from the blood of the earth, from the soil, and he's always digging around in the dirt. And his thing is basically just to use other people to get what he wants. Daisy, right? So I gotta look back at that and explore that more. But that sort of occurs in the one of the I think it's the third segment of the new Black Mirror with Beyond the Sea. Now, I didn't really want to watch that episode. I actually watched last because the title sort of threw me off because it's the title of course, the Kevin Spacey film about that musician or whatever from the early 2000s. And I've always hated that song and everything about it. But all I can say about that episode is it's got Aaron Paul, and Aaron Paul is in a lot of these dystopian things now. I mean, of course, we know Aaron Paul as Jesse from Breaking Bad, in which he's excellent. But then he pops up in season 3 of Westworld, and then he pops up in Black Mirror, and I thought it was interesting. So it's also got Josh Hartnett, and Josh Hartnett has popped up in the new Guy Ritchie movie. I've seen 2 Guy Ritchie movies in the last 3 days. One is The Covenant with Jake Gyllenhaal, and that one's just a little tangent here. I'm not going to give a full review of that movie, but I was really impressed with the movie because it's a Guy Ritchie movie, and I like Guy Ritchie movies. They're fun, but this is not like any of his other films, and it verges on being a American propaganda military film, but it goes in sort of a different direction because it's about his interpreter and really the use of words and language in this movie was pretty clever, because the movie's based around an interpreter, and basically the interpreter goes to these lengths to save Gyllenhaal's character, who's a special operator in Afghanistan. It takes place in 2018. So, it makes a point of saying that, like, we invaded and we were there for 20 years, but whatever, they're looking for IEDs or whatever, and the interpreter character, who is an Iraqi by birth, he's a great actor. I don't remember seeing him in anything else, but he's a great actor, and he was I think he was in the Danish military. He's excellent. He signs up as an interpreter, to work with these guys because, um, he was working for the Taliban, and he was a heroin trafficker, and his daughter was killed by them, so he goes to work for the Americans. But he's I've never seen a character like this depicted in any of the war films before. You think back to the Jake Gyllenhaal movies like, Rendition, and he's done some very militaristic, Iraq, war on terror centered films, but, it's called The Covenant obviously because there's a bond between these 2 men, and so what happens is he saves him, and they're ambushed, and he has to carry him like 100 clicks back to, Bagram Air Force Base, and, it's really well done because it was a Dantean journey. The imagery in the movie yes, Jarhead. The imagery in the movie became very, Dantean, and we've talked a lot about, um, the, Dante's Inferno recently in a bunch of the streams that we've done recently, and I was really impressed with the imagery because he does take him sort of there is a kind of a harrowing of hell, and, and it's also, it's Homeric in a sense, but whenever the characters in a film like that, um, whenever they go on a long Homeric journey and they experience differences in latitude, right? Says Jimmy Buffett. Differences in atmosphere, climate, the people, the enemy, all of that stuff. It's supposed to mimic or mirror rather the experience in the interior, and that's because Gyllenhaal's character is going through a kind of a hell. He's had a serious traumatic brain injury, and so for the rest of the movie, the kind of second half of the movie, he has to work on going back because the guy's now on a Taliban hit list, and he has to save him and try and honor the deal that these guys were promised about getting him back to America and citizenship because he obviously is a refugee now. So I thought that was pretty amazing. I don't know how I got on that. I guess because of Guy Ritchie, Operation Fortune. Operation Fortune was a pretty good movie. I was surprised by that. So I've seen some pretty good things over the past week, and we know that Hollywood is few and far between these days. So again, let's go back to Beyond the Sea, Aaron Paul. Um, so Aaron Paul and Josh Hartnett. Oh, Josh Hartnett was in Operation Fortune. That's why, and he was playing an actor in that. And I was talking to my family about it, and they were annoyed by it for good reason. His character is annoying. He's an annoying Hollywood actor playing essentially playing himself, but he plays I'd say that he plays a version of Hollywood actors that we see, which is probably more truthful. And so you'll have to see the movie to see what I'm talking about. But in Beyond the Sea, Aaron Paul and Josh Hartnett are these two astronauts, and they're living in a sort of a retro space pod. We've seen space before on Black Mirror with, yes, USS Callister, where we saw Jesse Plemons, also in Breaking Bad. And then we're kind of confused because we see them going through the motions on their space journey. They're two members of I guess, a kind of an international space station team that are running the spaceship. And then we see them go to separate ends of the ship and lie down in their space pod. So then what happens is we see them back on Earth, and they have very different lives. And Aaron Paul lives in a kind of a trad, small town atmosphere where he's wearing suspenders and he's got this quiet life, and Kate Mara is his wife, and he's got one child, and what's his name? Josh Hartnett also has a family, but it's in completely different places. So what that means, you figure out, is that the two characters are either living on the space station and they are connected, they're living double lives, or they're connected by a Neuralink to some sort of humanoid, android character on Earth that allows them to live like with an avatar and stay with their family. And so the latter ends up being the case. Okay. So, in other words, the two characters are astronauts, and it's kind of a future past. They're astronauts, and it's a retro version of space stations, but because of Neuralink, they are able to also live on Earth while they're asleep through their avatars, if that makes sense. Now, what happens is, um, we see that while they're asleep or whatever, some people break into, or no, while they're away, I guess, while they're in space and they're doing their duties or whatever, um, some hippies break into the house, some dirty hippies break into the house, and it's essentially Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which we've done, and the Chaz Manson group breaks in, and they kidnap the family, and they do a thing, right? Now, a couple of interesting things about this. One is that they we see the sigil painted on the wall that occurs in Bandersnatch and Demon 79, and that's on the in the thumbnail. That's also like we're going to talk a little bit about what the symbolism means there. What it really, I mean, what it looks like is on the in the thumbnail, it looks like a field goal, right? Or like a tuning fork, and it's upside down in Bandersnatch, and it functions as a sort of a rune on a stone, or it's like a rune stone. And so the sigil or the glyph gonna end up being a glyph in, Bandersnatch, but it's like a dialectical decision making, and when you take one path, that leads you on a series of other paths, and it becomes a sort of a choose your own adventure. That is sort of the theme of season 6, which is following on from Bandersnatch of 2019. So what happens is the family gets murdered, and Josh Hartnett, of course, is back up on the space station, and he wakes up, and his family's gone, and his humanoid has been destroyed. So he's not able to go back to Earth and spend time with his family. Aaron Paul's character kind of sympathizes with him, and he goes up and he sees at one point he walks into like sort of the botany department at UT Austin on the spaceship, and he looks, and Josh Hartnett is kind of he's like, and he's frozen in this terrible, terrible facial expression. And I got to say that like the things that they don't scare me, but they shock me in movies are when people all of a sudden when characters turn corners and people are frozen in weird facial expressions, unnatural facial expressions. It looks demonic to me. That always kind of frightens me. Of course, the thing that frightens me the most is like in movies when someone opens the shades and there's a character like right on the other side of the window staring into the house. That always I always that always bugs me. So so Aaron Paul says to Kate Mara, who by the way is great in what's it called? House of Cards. She's in House of Cards season 1. She has the shocking scene with the train. There's a lot of train stuff going on in movies. I can't even get into that. I'll probably we've been getting into that on Boiler Room and I'll also be on TNT Radio Live again on Friday at 5:40 for the closing segment. But there's so much stuff about trains that's obviously gone on from the DeLeo book and from the East Palestine thing in Ohio, from the Bhopal, India incident, and all the chemical spills and all that stuff. Um, interestingly enough, Avatar 2 also started off with the train derailment. So there's a lot of that. But so so Aaron Paul is at home and he's talking to Kate Mara and he's like, the guy is going psycho up there. We need to offer him an outlet because he's going crazy. So he offers Josh Hartnett his his avatar, his humanoid body so that he can come down to Earth. Well, this ends up being a sort of a nightmare, and Josh Hartnett is now the character of Josh Hartnett is now inhabiting the Aaron Paul avatar, and of course, he starts to hit on Kate Mara and use them as his family. And we think that it's going to result in him, locking out Aaron Paul. But what this is really about is that when it's called Beyond the Sea, it means that my favorite word, right, Jethro, is the abyss. They're beyond the abyss. And the sea, of course, functions as a double for space. That's where they train and maybe where everything takes place. I don't know. But by the way, notice the fact that there was a media blitz today in the news about the Titanic space ocean abyss pod. That's like all over the place. The scientists went down and they lost communication with the ship and they were going down to the Titanic thing. Cares about the Titanic? I mean, not who cares about the Titanic, but there's a lot of other stuff that's going on in the world that's not 100 years old that we haven't explored already. And it's almost like, okay, there are train derailments all over the country, and there are actual, there are disasters that are happening now. But this takes the people's fascination and their attention away from that because now we can go out in the middle of the ocean. We can go look down at the Titanic again. It's crazy. So beyond the sea means that first of all, it's the song that Josh Hartnett uses to seduce his future wife, and then he's going to do that to seduce. It becomes their song. It becomes their love song. So it's not really a seduction, but he uses it in terms of seduction with Kate Mara, and it means that beyond the sea is like he's beyond culpability. He's beyond control because he's on the other side of the abyss. It becomes almost this kind of esoteric journey. Also, remember that like in 2001 when we see in the end the image of the Earth that is floating in space with its womb, right? Its atmosphere juxtaposed against the star child, which is in its womb, and they're the same size. They're both glowing at the end of 2001. the Star Child is here, the Earth is here. They're both in their sort of wombs, and they're facing one another. And of course, that movie is about panspermia, but and also a kind of Masonic esoteric journey to illumination and all that stuff. But um, the the way that the characters are in their space pod, they also when they go to sleep, they're in a weird, almost fetal position, but they're upright. They're on their backs looking up, but they're not lying flat on their back. They're not, supine. They're lying in a weird fetal position, almost as if it's circular, like it becomes a womb. And we also have the idea of children in the show, and then we've got, creating a new womb for your brain because your brain is what's carrying around your human your ancestors and your DNA and your in your skin suit, right? Because these guys are wearing a human skin suit through the Neuralink. Also, your brain is in a kind of a womb, right? Your brain is in an amniotic, like there's an amniotic fluid, and then your brain is in fluid, and then it's got the womb of the skull. So it's this kind of continuous meta version of a womb, and that's to say that the characters are beyond reach. They're beyond humanity, in this sense. So it becomes a kind of a nightmare. Now, I know that was pretty loose. That one wasn't that coherent. I'll try to make the next one a little bit more coherent here. Because but one of the things about Black Mirror is there is an incoherence that is inherent in the storyline. Number one, it's episodic. So it's like what's Jerry's show? It's like Hitchcock, it's like Hitchcock or Twilight Zone, and it kind of redoes the episodic formula of the dystopian tales. So, like in the old movies, I mean, in the old TV shows, we would get all kinds of things thrown at us. We would get aliens, we would get future tech, we would get, monsters. And we get that with Black Mirror, but the focus of Black Mirror is obviously supposed to be something that is set in the future. Now, the interesting thing with the season 6 is that it's set in a lot of it is set in the past, or at least it has sort of a past imagery. It kind of almost functions as iconography, but, um, or it takes place in the current, and that is mixed in with, Choose Your Own Adventure, and we get that also in Joan is Awful. Now, I thought that I would hate this one. This is the first episode of season 6. So what happens in Joan is Awful. It reminded me of Everybody Hates Chris. I hate those kind of titles. But first of all, we get Joan. So you can't help but think of a character who is martyred for everybody else. Everybody else is there to she's a she's accused of sins and faults for everyone to see. And that's what happens in the show. So in Joan is Awful, we get a kind of a woman who has the same job really as the show Devs. Now Devs is far superior to this, but it's completely different, but it's superior because the entire show focuses on it, and Devs, spoiler, Devs ends up being Deus, right? Because Alex Garland already did Ex Machina, and then so he does the show Deus or Devs, which is where it's a guy played by Ron Swanson is doing he's running a computer tech company, and he even, says in the show that he's not the computer genius, he's just an entrepreneur who runs this, but he runs it because he wants to relive or recreate the experience he had with his daughter because he's lost his daughter. And they end up using quantum technology and black cubes to form a kind of a metaverse where he can live forever. But as part of that, he's able to look into the past using he uses GPS and quantum technology to look back at specific moments in the past, and then he's able to look forward into the future and use it predictive in a predictive fashion, and then he can load his brain into the supercomputer, and he can live forever in the metaverse. Now, Joan is Awful is like where a lady named Joan is working at a company that's clearly like that because and we do find out that it is a company built on quantum and AI. And AI functions as the main kind of purveyor of the theme and the narrative of this TV show. So because it becomes a TV show. So we see Joan and she is She is a white woman working at a tech company, and she's kind of a man. She's like a low level managerial character, and she's got this, sort of, a hip haircut, like where it's white shock streaks of hair in the front, and they're, it's just whatever. And the first scene is her firing someone. So then, she goes and she gets text messages from her ex-boyfriend or whatever, and she goes and talks to him, and then she goes home and she spends time with her, I guess, her fiance. It's either her husband or fiance. And they decide to sit down and watch a new Netflix show. So it becomes meta, right? And as she's watching the Netflix show, it's one of those things where clearly they're watching a show that is their own life, but they are like unable to comprehend it. So look, if you were watching a television show and it had exactly what you'd done that day, but it just had a different, it had an actor playing it, but it was all the same stuff, you'd immediately catch on. You'd be like, this is weird because you're clued in. Well, they're just sort of, it shows, it's kind of a hilarious take on the vegetative state of many Netflix enjoyers because they're in their sort of mod apartment watching their show, and then they begin to catch on, and then finally they say, "Wait a minute, this is weird." And the character is named Joan, but it's Salma Hayek. Yeah, Salma Hayek is still hot. She is she's playing Joan, and they dramatize the events of the day, and then it eventually, like what happens in the show is um she uh, she goes and talks to her ex-boyfriend, and then the fiance in real life says, "Wait a minute, you talked to him, and what's this?" And they see the text messages. She's caught in a lie, and then he essentially kicks her out. So it goes through a series of events where she's trying to figure out. She goes back to work, everyone hates her, and then she gets fired, and then she watches the show that night, and she gets fired, and it it's like this continual um decline in the life of this character, Joan. Well, she goes to her lawyer and she says, "Is there anything I can do? Because they've stolen my image here. And how can they do this to my life?" And what's funny is the lawyer says, "No, you signed the toss. And in this, it clearly says that your likeness can be used for dramatic situations." She says, "Yeah, but what about, when she um made it look like I was cheating or whatever?" And it says, like, everything is covered in the airtight agreement. So what's her way out of it? Well, she eventually figures out, well, Salma Hayek is playing me, so maybe I can somehow get in touch with Salma Hayek. And so then it becomes this like this take on celebrity worship because the lawyer says, The Salma Hayek? You think you can get in touch with the Salma Hayek? I mean, you can't contact her. Look at her. She's great on TV." And she's like, "Yeah, but she's playing me." And she says, "Yeah, but you signed the terms of service. You signed the agreement." Well, so then she does this very Black Mirror thing where she puts on a kind of a what's the character's name? The comic book lady who wears the cheerleader outfit, and she's a monarch, and she's butterflies, and she's split. She's in love with Joker or whatever, the psychiatrist, whatever that character's name. I don't know the comic books, but she does that, and she goes into a church. She takes a bunch. Well, I don't want to describe it because it's pretty gross. I mean, it's like very gross. She takes a bunch of laxative and she goes into a breaks into a wedding, and she does a bunch of gross things because she knows that that will get the attention of Salma Hayek. Well, then next scene is we see Salma Hayek talking to her lawyer, and her lawyer says, um, "Yeah, but you're not in the show." And we're like, "What does that mean?" Well, so the way that the character that's pretty clever here because the way that the character's life is able to be dramatized almost in real time is because um, of the panopticon, really, because of your phone and because of your social media. So the lady is she works at a tech company. She's always on her phone. She's always talking near the phone. It picks up everything she says, and then it runs it through an AI, and then it puts the exact, uses GPS. It uses the cameras on all the phones in an interconnected way. Like this is very Uncle Ted, Edward Snowden, panopticon meta reality. So it immediately puts out a dramatization. Now, Salma Hayek is one of the actresses in the show that is not actually in the show because again, she has also licensed her image to be in the show. So it's another actor playing her, but it's using deepfake to portray her. So then we go one step further, and Salma Hayek meets up with the actress, and they break into the computer company, and they come across Michael Cera. And this is a good scene because Michael Cera is like the operator, and he's got all of the screens, and he's like the producer for the show. And he says, "Look, this show is called Joan is Awful because we tried to make it positive, and we realized that nobody would wanna watch anything that was positive. It has to be negative. People wanna see the downfall of people. And also, I'm not the real Michael Cera. I'm an actor playing him for this show. So you have to get back to the real life Joan, right? Who is called, what is she called? She's called, Actual Joan or something. So, in other words, there's levels of Joan. There's the actual Joan, who the actress that they choose to play her is looks not like an act she looks like a normal person, but that's another meta level because there's an actual Joan, then there's the actress playing Joan, then there's another Joan, then we're watching the show, and then there's Salma Hayek Joan, and then there's an actress playing Salma Hayek in the show, and then there's us watching Netflix. So, do you see how it becomes this circular version of, like, what's real? And the only way that they're able to the source, thank you, the source, Joan. So, and that kind of ties in with, Jake Gyllenhaal again, who's in that movie Source Code. That is a great movie. That's by David Bowie's son, and is great because that's like body mods, war on terror, metaverse. There's a train. Oh, wow, I just realized that. The movie is about a train derailing. That's crazy, right? Another movie with a train derailing? So so in other words, they have to get back to the source and like that is kind of a this takes on a sort of a Gnostic theme because it means that she's in a prison planet and she has to find the path to illumination in order to get back to herself and break out of the matrix by finding the creator God. And so I guess Joan is kind of a Sophia character in this. I don't know. But so she does that by smashing the golden quantum computer, which is it's always the same. It's shown the same way in devs. And then we see her released, and then it's just Joan, it's Source Joan again, and then she, you know, walks off into her life. But I think that's interesting because we hear so much and we see so much, excuse me, about quantum computing and about AI now and deepfakes that it's interesting that Black Mirror predicts that in a number of ways, right? I mean, that's kind of the point in the first couple seasons, but really takes it into a sort of a everyday cultural level that becomes satirical. I mean, it always was a satire, but as we know, satire contains the truth. Fiction contains the truth by holding up a mirror, right, to reality and showing you that this is what is happening. Now, that's what Black Mirror is supposed to do, right? That we're looking at reality and culture because it shows us a mirror, and we're supposed to see in the mirror what is truthful versus what is factual. In other words, just like in fiction, we're able to understand truth uh, when it's dramatized on a stage or in a novel or in poems. It's more accurately than we're able to see in our own lives because there's this weird cognitive dissonance that most people have. I mean, I think a lot of people will never get it anyway, and probably even the people making the show don't particularly get it, or they're making it for different reasons, right? Predictive programming, revelation of the method, a number of different things. But what I think is clever about this show is the fact that it's called Black Mirror because it shows that the black mirror is not just it's through through a scanner darkly, right? You see through we're piercing the veil. Um, and the black mirror is I always think of John Dee and Edward Kelly and the scrying stones. Now, the black mirror was also a kind of a 19th century thing. Thomas Gray poet Thomas Gray, right? Elegy written in a country churchyard, wrote about the Black Mirror, and this is like a mirror that you go into the Lake District and you hold up and you look at the landscape in reverse, and so it shows you an image of the landscape that you see in a different aesthetic than you would with your normal eye. But the Black Mirror, in terms of the Renaissance and John Dee and Edward Kelly, is a scrying stone. It's a kind of a crystal ball. You see into the future, which means that you're looking into a kind of a occult, translucent version of the future that may occur according to interpretation. And so I think that's clever because also remember we are literally, this is important to keep in mind. We are literally looking into the Black Mirror when we're watching Black Mirror because the flat screen television is black. It's a black rectangle. When we're looking at our phones, it's a black monolithic rectangle. Like in 2001: A Space Odyssey, every time they see the black monolith, they wanna go up and touch the screen. It's a touch screen, just like you touch the scrying stone. So you remember when Neil deGrasse Tyson was on Adam Freeland's show, and they afterwards, they were making fun of the fact that he kept saying this thing. He was like, you know that the only time that you could ever touch yourself in the mirror truly, right, is you can only kiss yourself on the lips in the mirror, which is a kind of a which is the definition of a narcissistic statement as well, right? Narcissus is in love with himself because he sees himself in the dark mirror, right? In the woods. He's in love with echo, so he hears himself. So it's interesting because when the television is off, you see yourself in the black mirror looking at the screen, and then when it's on, you're looking into this kind of version of the future or reality. So, I like this show because it is a it is a thinking show. It's not like a deep thinking show, but it does present some interesting things. I mean, the very first episode of Black Mirror obviously was predictive of David Cameron because the politician in love with Pig. Now we'd actually seen that when we did the Hunter S. Thompson, I think Songs of the Doomed analysis because we talked about when Hunter S. Thompson was running the campaign. He was on the campaign for Jimmy Carter. And in one of the campaigns that Hunter S. Thompson was involved with, remember, he introduced the idea to say, let's ruin the other guy by just saying that he had carnal, gross, pervert relations with a pig. And, I think it was Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter was like, "No, I don't wanna do that. That's depraved." And it's like, it doesn't matter if it's true or not. Well, the only thing that matters is by introducing that into the zeitgeist, the other character has to deny it. They're gonna be forced to deny it at some point. And even by denying it, they've ruined it because in the minds of the public consciousness, they don't wanna be associated with anybody who even has to deny that. Does that make sense? So, that occurred in Black Mirror episode 1, but we're just focusing on 1 episode of 5 and then some of 6. So, jumping to, the last episode, I think, of 5, which was, Smithereens. So, Smithereens is good because what we have is what we have is a character who, gets kidnapped, and he is, in a car, and the guy with his kidnapper, and the guy's in the front seat. We kind of I don't know, I kinda woke up to this one, in terms of I fell asleep on another episode, and then I sort of came to watching this one, but it was interesting because the kidnapper is the guy who runs the operation for the all-seeing panopticon in the latest James Bond. He's that guy. And so he gets the guy to make a call for him, and he says he'll only basically, like, the police come and they're watching, it becomes a hostage situation. He's taking the guy hostage, and he says he's only gonna let him go if he can get in touch with this guy. And, it's kinda stupid because the guy's in a field, they're in a car, and they're in England, and they're in a field, and they bring a sniper, and the sniper says, I can't get a shot." And it's like, "Yeah, but you're aiming for the front of the car, and you're obviously gonna get you're gonna hit the guy in the back seat? Why are you aiming at the front of the car? Just go around, walk 50 feet and go around to the side, and then you have a side shot of the guy who's in the front seat, and you won't hit the guy who's the hostage in the back seat. It didn't make any sense. So, um, what's interesting about that one, all I'll say is that the guy he wants to get in touch with is basically Jack Dorsey because he's played by, um what's his name from that '70s show, who plays a really good version of Jack Dorsey. So the guy they can't contact him because he is, on a retreat in the desert. He's essentially like at a private, Palm Springs, Burning Man facility, and, and the his handlers who run the company won't contact him, and they make a really big to-do of the fact that they have to lie about the reasons for this thing to the guy and protect him, and they try and tell him through his earpiece, like, what he should say to the hostage taker as communication. So, and at one point, he takes the earpiece out and he says, "Look, I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. They're trying to tell me what to say to you, and they ran it through a vetting process, and they say these are the top 10 best things to say to the hostage taker." And it's like it becomes BuzzFeed, right? Instead of just the guy listening to him and telling him. So all the guy wants to tell him is that he was in a car with his family. Again, this is about the destruction of the family. He was in a car with his family, and he had, like, his daughter in the car, and he got a notification on his phone. He looked down for 1 second, and in that 1 second, the car crashed, and he killed his family. And he blamed it he was not held culpable because it was the other person's fault, but he has this total breakdown, and he says, "It was my fault. It was my fault." And I thought that was a really good episode because it shows that, it was kind of a Uncle Ted Killdozer type of situation where the guy is put into extreme circumstances, because of the general sort of corruption of society, even though he is the one he did kill his family. I mean, it was his fault. He's the one who looked down at the notification. Did all this stuff, and he doesn't want to blame the Jack Dorsey character. He just wants to know why is this a thing. So the Dorsey character admits that he designed it this way. He designed it, and we've seen that in public revelations from these tech guys that they designed it that way so that because it becomes completely addictive. So that like I always think it's funny, like when they talk about what's his name, Sean. I can't remember any of these tech people's names. The guy that Justin Timberlake plays in the Social Network, Sean, the guy who did Napster. Remember the Napster guy came out and he was like, when we started Facebook, we did the likes and the dings because it would serve as a kind of Pavlov's dog, right? You get addicted to the sound of the ding, and then you start to feel self-worth because of the notification. Now, of course, nobody now has notifications on for anything, but people still have their self-worth determined by the number of likes they get for their Facebook posts. Now, who's on I mean, I don't know. If you're on Facebook, whatever, that's fine. But I'm saying that's also a metaphor for all of social media. That's one of the points, right? Because it sucks you in and then it becomes a social media, it becomes a meta reality where your entire life, you know, many people, Sean Parker, thank you, Jethro. Many people who live solely online have no life outside of that, right? That's obvious. And it's like that by design. It sort of takes those things and puts them into their extreme. And the natural extension of that will be the Coom pods and the metaverse, right? And the sort of new religion of the self that we see in all this stuff. But I thought it was interesting because it presents an interesting moral dilemma and a kind of dichotomy where people in the show who are living real life, they don't understand what it's about. And the real revelation that I got from that show, which kind of just it kind of dinged to me like a notification, was that the show makes it apparent that your entire life is a Facebook notification. Because when the guy ends up dying in a botched hostage situation where, that he's letting the guy go at the end of that episode, he's letting the guy go. And Then the guy with a soul says, you don't have to KY. Give me the gun, and we can both walk out of here and it'll be fine. You don't have to do this. And then they start wrestling over the gun and then they get shot, right? Well, we see that at the end of that, the Jack Dorsey character gets the notification on his computer thousands of miles away in America. He gets the notification on his computer that they're dead, even though he was just talking to them. He gets it through the the news media, like the online network and the social media posts, because everybody's watching this thing. And he just simply closes the computer, and that's it. And then it shows this sort of montage of all the people walking around, and they're getting a notification of hostage situation in England, right? And they click on it, and then they go about their lives, and then bam, turns out they're both dead, and then they just go on about their lives, and it just shows you that it's such a sad state of affairs when that's isn't that the way that life has become for many people in real life, right? Not just the terrible things, but the good things that happen. Like if something good happens for you and you want to celebrate it with the people that you love or your colleagues or your work colleagues or something, it's like you have to really make a point of telling them what happened, and then they hear it secondhand from you, even though it happened to you, and then they're kind of like, it's just everything's relative, everything's the same as everything else, right? It's like, oh, what if you started a YouTube and your video went viral and you worked really hard on it and you got 300,000 views and you ended up being on some show, right? Which is like a big accomplishment. You worked hard for that, or that you started a business or something like that. It's like, then they say, "Oh, is that like this?" Jimmy was started a business the other day. Tell him about that, and then it becomes that. So everything's relative. Nothing really matters anymore to people like this. And yeah, they get. Jason says people are so swept up in the monotonous day to day momentum, they are totally numb. People are completely numb. So I thought it was an interesting take on that. That your life is just a notification bell. So next one, I'm gonna turn on the fan real quick. The next one we're gonna talk about is, let's see, we did Joan is awful. We did Smithereens. We did Beyond the Sea. Um, what's the one with the celebrities? Somebody put the episode with the name of the, because I don't care about the episode names. Somebody put the names of the celebrities. Or with the it's about the celebrities and the paparazzi from season 6. It's like episode 2, I think. Can somebody put the name of that in the chat while I turn on this fan, please? Thank you. Hold on a second. There we go. Okay. All right. Anybody get it? What's the name of this episode? And it's a take on the paparazzi. I'm gonna look it up. Episode, Black Mirror. I like this episode because it didn't have any real major stars in it. Mazey Day, that's what it's called. So it's called Mazey Day. And remember I did a stream called Mazey Meandering a while back. And that comes from the Romantic poets. It comes from I think it's Samuel Taylor Coleridge and Kubla Khan. Um, because the river is mazy meandering through right through the through Alf, right? The river Alf, ALPH. So mazy is like kind of a wandering. And so the character's name in this is Mazey Day. So this one's interesting because it's about paparazzi, and you can't help but think of, for instance, Princess Diana, but this one takes on celebrities. So what happens here is we have a celeb actress who is in Czechoslovakia. Interesting. She's in the Czech Republic, and she's filming a kind of a period piece, right, like a Jane Austen movie. And we see her, "Break, everybody, time for your sides, learn your sides," right? So she goes off and she learns her sides, but she, somebody on the set says, "Okay, they brought you your party favor." So she goes home to her flat that she's got while she's, on set. She's learning her sides. Of course, she's drinking her wine. If there's one thing I cannot stand, okay, there's 2 things that I cannot stand, okay, in movies or in TV shows. One is people who eat apples. I can't stand that in real life either, because anytime I see somebody who's like, when you're at work or when you're out in the world and there's somebody who has an apple, it's always like this. Apple, right? And then they go like this. They wipe it on their shoulder. They make a big it's like a ritual they do, right? You gotta wipe your apple on your shoulder, right? And then there's a crunch, mm, apple, like that. And it's like, shut up. It's the most audible eating I've ever heard. It's like you sound like a beast eating your apple. Oh, you're so you're so ecological walking around eating your apple. It's that's what really grinds my gears, folks. The other is television shows, when anyone is sitting around drinking wine, it becomes this thing. It's like this you have to reach this position in life where, oh, you're a grown up and you have a house but more wine, more wine, and it's always extra large glasses and they're drinking red wine. First of all, in my own life, when people are drinking wine, it's usually white wine. It's not red wine, but in TV shows, it's always red wine, right? They're always drinking red wine from extra large goblets. Um, what was the other thing that? Oh my god, oh my gosh, have you ever noticed how? This is the thing, how women in movies always eat ice cream from the bucket. Have you noticed this? They always eat ice cream from the bucket, and what I mean is, like, they always go they always do it when there's been a breakup. It's a trope on a television show where there's a breakup and the women get together and they go, "Oh," and "We're gonna eat ice cream because 'cause we're bad." Right? They they take out the Ben& and Jerry's bucket and they have their little spoon, and they always do this thing. So, they eat the ice cream, and, like, they eat it with the spoon face down, and they leave a little bit of ice cream on the spoon, and then they go like this, and they talk with the spoon like this, like this. I can't believe that William broke up with you. I can't believe it." Like that, like, they're shaking the ice cream on the spoon. You know what I'm talking you guys know what I'm talking about? And then they go, "Oh, you're so bad." And then they put the spoon in the bucket, and then they just leave it there on the counter. They leave the carton on the counter. I guess that's why I guess that's why, Bateman in American Psycho, he's like, "No, put the spoon in the carton," right? Because she's eating her, gelato or whatever and is gonna leave this. I don't know. They just leave it there. What happens to the rest of it? You don't put the top on it, but first of all, put it in a bowl or glass or something. That always annoys me. So, anyway, so she's sitting there. I'm sorry, I just went on a little rant there, but so Maisie Day is sitting there drinking her wine, okay, by herself, reading her sides, and guess what? Ooh, it's time to be naughty. Somebody gave me some party favors. So she takes out her mushrooms and she's like, "Ooh, it's a little I got a cap. I'm so bad." And she eats her cap and she gets totally wasted and she's completely out of control. This lady is a total lightweight or whatever. And he, runs out of cigarettes, so she's gotta get in her car. So she drives off in the Czech Republic by herself as if that's gonna happen because she's a celebrity, and every other scene, she's with a driver. But all of a sudden, she's by herself, so she goes by herself, and as she's driving, she does, um, she does the, Matthew Broderick thing, and something happens on the road, and she leaves, right? This is why he's, not a they're not a big fan of him in Ireland, right? I knew that 20 years ago. I mean, I guess everybody did there, but um, anyway, so I can't say any more about that because allegedly he went there on vacation. That's all I'll say about that. So, so so anyway, then we cut to LA and we have a kind of a sepia toned LA. It's always like this. California is so warm, right? So warm and glowy. It's this glowing land of golden bodies or whatever. Um, they don't show any of the burning flames and the hellscape. But anyway, so we see these paparazzi, and there is a girl that's like living in her apartment. She's like miserable. She's about to get kicked out by her stunning and brave flatmate or whatever. And he's like, he says, can you do me a favor? Like, I have allergies, and can you not fry the ginger and the whatever together because it's very fragrant and it offends my allergies, right? So I thought, racist. Yeah, because there's a lot in in this season about um fragrant foods and how people use that as a kind of a RACIAL thing about people. Now, look, at the same time, it's like, don't go to your small office job and fry your gingbot in the microwave when Linda's trying to work over there and the whole office is going to stink. This is like ridiculous. The guy's in the apartment and, you know, so so she's like, "Okay," and then eventually he wants to kick her out because she's not making enough money, as a paparazzo. So what happens is she takes a picture of a celeb, basically, Tom Coom coming out of, Malibu, a rundown Malibu motel, and she snaps a picture of it, and then she goes and she gets confronted by the guy coming out, and he says, "Please don't sell that picture. I'll buy the picture from you right now. You're gonna end my life." And she drives off and she sells it to her. She got her job too. They're all involved in this thing. And she sells it to I don't know, some total scumbag. And he's like, I'll give you $300 for it. Right. And she's like, other guy promised me 500. He's like, fine, I'll give you 400. So then she sells the picture. Well, then the next day she sees this guy has KY'd, right? Because he was outed. Now this creates a thing about you can tell that this is the narrative of this is gonna be one of them is, you know, whether it's appropriate to out people because celebrities are human beings too, right? Well, regardless of that, he did tell her that he was gonna die if, she took the picture, if she published the picture, and then he does. So all of the other celebrities, the paparazzi, their response is, "Good, he had it coming to him." And she's like disgusted by this, so she walks away. And the funny thing about that scene is we see it becomes a sort of a free Britney thing because they're waiting on some Paris Hilton type to show up, like as if it were the 2000s. Because by the way, it is set in the 2000s because we see the cell phones. They don't have iPhones; they've got like flip phones. And, it's just kinda retro, so we see this Paris Hilton character show up, and the paparazzi are absolutely ruthless, and one of the guys says, "Hey, you're a scumbag," or something like that, and she turns around, and they're doing that to elicit a reaction. I actually saw that, by the way, in a clip the other day of when Mike Tyson was going into he was, like, walking through a crowd, and it's that famous clip of one of the guys saying something like, "Get him a straitjacket," and Tyson goes off on the guy. Have you seen that? Now, I felt for Mike Tyson in that one because he clearly was hurt. I mean, you can see the pain in his eyes. And I'm not trying to be too sentimental about this, but you can clearly, just use your compassion for a second. And I like Mike Tyson a lot. I actually I know that's not original. Probably everybody loves Mike Tyson, but I really, I've got this thing about Mike Tyson because I think that it's I get it, the reason that people lampoon him and his voice and all that stuff, because he's a character and all that. But, I gotta say that his speaking tour have you ever seen the film of his speaking tour and the special they did of him on HBO where he tells the story of his life? It's a spoken word thing, is like one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. I was like, I've never been so wrong about somebody in my life. This guy is amazing. He's really got a handle on words and language and a power of language. Not just I'm not saying just for Mike Tyson or for a boxer. I'm saying, I'm saying like he's a really eloquent guy. And you know, I feel for his pain because he said that one thing. I guess I probably said it before, but he said that one thing where he said he was in so much pain as a boxer because he realized that he was the toughest guy on earth. He could fight anybody in the world and win. And that's real. He could. This guy could fight any single person on earth and win. And he realized there was nobody else left to fight. So he's just fighting himself. So it becomes self-destructive. So when he's walking through that crowd and the guy said the thing about the straitjacket and he turned around, you can see the pain in his eyes because I know that his mom was schizophrenic. I think his mom was in a straitjacket. I think they tried to put him in a straitjacket. And so that becomes a thing for him. So I really felt for him in that moment. But yeah, he was you know, it's amazing what happens to people, but what they're able to do. I mean, um, so anyway, whatever. I just like to point that out. But anyway, so the paparazzo, the lady, sees. Well, yeah. Do you think so, though, Maddie? I mean, and it wasn't creeper. It was the other thing. I'm not saying that's better. I'm just saying it was a Roypist. It wasn't a creeper. And also I just think that he was probably set up with that. I don't know. I don't know. And if not, I mean, yes, that sucks, but it wasn't creeper. And so I don't know. I just think he was probably set up with that. It just makes sense that he was set up. A lot of the circumstances surrounding that were pretty fucked up. So um I don't know. Whatever. It's not about Mike Tyson, but I just I felt for him in that particular moment, I guess. Um so so anyway, he so what was I saying? So the paparazzo decides to leave, like, and says, "Hey, I actually care about people, even though I got this person killed through what I do. I'm not as much of a scumbag as these other people who just don't care." But anyway, she gets an offer. She realizes she's about to get kicked out of her apartment because she can't afford her rent. And then she finds out that the girl who was the actress in the Czech show got kicked off the set for drug use and all this stuff, and is now uh in LA somewhere. And if she can get a picture of him, she'll get $20,000. So of course she sells out and she's like, I'll do it. So she somehow finds out where this person is, and it's through like a delivery service. They deliver Vietnamese food to her every day. So she follows them, and then they realize that she's following her, and they slash her tires. So she calls in the other guy, one of the other paparazzos on the motorcycle, and they follow him, and they go up to basically like an Esalen Institute. It's a rehab facility, and the lady has been the actress has been contacted by one of these psychiatrists to the stars. So essentially, it's like, oh, Jolly and West comes and tells her that he can get her through her pain and her addiction and her problems and get her back on top, but she has to trust him. So he takes her to this, essentially like an Esalen Institute. Well, they get to this place and they see that it's heavily guarded and they've got a privacy wall above the fence and all this stuff. They sneak in, and then when they look into the place, they hear screams, and they look in and they see that she's got a chain around her neck. And she's been completely there's a chain to the floor, and that she's basically enslaved in this place. So the woman, they break in, and the paparazzo tries to set her free, right? And the other guys are taking pictures of her, and this is going to be scandalous. They've got these pictures of this woman who's now being, chained up in this place. So you're wondering what's going to happen here. Well, it's I don't know. What happens is the moon comes out, and the actress turns into a werewolf. She has lycanthropy, right? She's got a werewolfism, werewolf disease, and we covered this in the John Webster stream on the Duchess of Malfi. If you remember, we did that way back, which was The Skull Beneath the Skin. It's a Renaissance play by John Webster that's about that, about werewolfism. And so that's why it takes place in, well, it should be, Romania, I guess, but they say Czech Republic in the show. So she didn't actually run over a person, she ran over a werewolf man, and when she did that, she got bit. That's why she got kicked off the set. So then they all get slaughtered by the werewolf, and then that's the end of the show. So that becomes kind of a Twilight Zone episode. But I thought that it was kind of interesting because it it's supposed to show the metaphor is that the celebrities are werewolves, right? They live at night. They like live at night voraciously, right? They wouldst thou like to live fergaliciously? They all live fergaliciously at night, and during the day they are just their nobles in their house or whatever. Show The Idol on HBO, which is basically just a prawn show. I watched episode 3 with The Weekend and Jonathan Depp's daughter. Maybe we'll do an analysis of that in the future. Is like also the same thing. She lives fergaliciously at night, and during the day, she just lives in her manor atop the hill. So it's kind of saying, that celebs are like this until it gets to be too much. But it also brings in the paparazzi thing with celebrities. But see, that's notice how paparazzi culture is not really it doesn't really matter to us anymore like it did, let's say, in the 2000s with with like Perez Hilton and stuff, because now everyone is a paparazzo, right? Everybody films everything every day, all day. Everything people do is filmed. That's the reason why uh, Bunner Hyden, the son of the certain of Bo Jiden, um, is sort of, I guess, unblackmailable because everything he does is already filmed 24/7. So, and I say that facetiously, but seriously, he films everything all the time. And even, we live in the Seeing Stone um, Peter Thiel world where in Prism Project, where everything we do is recorded, right? It's recorded by your Alexa if you have that on, or your phone, or your predictive algorithm, or your ads, or everything's filmed through your television, watching you back like in 1984 come to life. Everything's filmed everywhere all the time. So there's no real need for paparazzi because also everyone is the star of their own movie. Everybody's on social media. Social media exists partly for everybody to have the feeling that they have parity with celebrities and celebrity culture. You can get on Twitter and you can talk to Russell Crowe, right? I mean, Jethro remembers how excited I was when I tweeted at Robert Patrick about Bat Boy from X Files, and he responded, and I thought that was like oh my gosh, that's so cool. Now I did that ironically, also, of course, and I don't really care. The point is that it is kind of cool, sometimes, but for the average, I guess, normie or whatever out there, that's the point that you are now the celebrity also. Does that make sense? So, yeah, please like and share the stream, everybody. Please make sure you hit that notification bell so that when I um, run a little late, like I hate running late and I hate pushing it back, but I just decided to push it back a little bit today. Just I wouldn't even change the bell or anything just because there's stuff going on. But I hate running late. But see, put on the notification bell so you won't miss it. And also, you can, of course, support me via the number of platforms and including these right here. And don't forget that this Friday at 5:40 Eastern Time, I will be on TNT Radio Live again with Hesher, probably discussing Black Mirror, and I don't know, whatever else they want to discuss. And also on Boiler Room Thursday night. And also watch Digital Minefield, Real Cooter Brown, our friend Maddie. Go to Maddie's channel, Digital Minefield, because we had a good conversation last night. My good friend over there, please go to his channel and subscribe. So I'm about to go on vacation. Hey, there's my sister. Right when I was about to say I'm about to go on vacation, there's my sister out there. And I'm about to go down to see her for a couple weeks. Thank goodness. I'm ready to GTFO, man. I'm sick of this shit. So I'm ready to get out of town and go see her for a while. So it'll be good to get down south there for a while. So everybody say hi to my sister. So what's the next one we should do? Let's talk about Demon 79, and then we'll get to BRAINSCAN and Bandersnatch. So So Demon 79 is, by far, I think, the best of this season. I watched it twice over, it's really good, and, this one is there's a great movie called In Fabric. It's called In Fabric, and I would recommend you watch that movie because it's kind of like I don't know if it's an A24 film. I think it is, and it's from, like, maybe 2017, something like that, 2019. It took me a long time to find this movie to watch it, but it's a great movie, and it's essentially the same as this. So so that one is about a woman who works in a kind of a Clockwork Orange version of reality in the 70s. So it's a dystopian reality of the 70s, and a woman's working in a department store, and she finds that the dresses are haunted, and essentially there's a demon that is attached to a red dress and is killing people. Now that one is clever. But what happens in this is slightly different. So so first of all, the font of the story is very slasher. It says Demon 79 in red, in that red font that we get with Stranger Things in the 70s, and the 70s and 80s slasher movies. And we focus on this, she's a foreign girl and she's single and she wakes up to this drab 70s flat. Oh my gosh, it's terrible. Living in England in the 70s is like hell. I mean, it's absolutely terrible. Everything's bombed out and blitzed, and you're living in a row house, and it's like, you know, the cold towns, and you're living in Birmingham, and it's whatever. It's just awful. And she wakes up to this alarm, and the song that's playing is pretty funny because it's like it sounds like in Debs, they have the Crosby, Stills, and Nash song "Guinevere," which is a beautiful song, but it's obviously meant to contrast with the themes of the show. But this one is like we get this song, and it's talking about like float on down the river of death. That's her wake up song. So she gets up. She's a lonely girl, a lonely young woman. She gets dressed, and she's quite attractive. I mean, I guess she must be I guess she's Pakistani, and she gets up and she goes to her department store job. She drives there in her Mini, and, it's kinda weird because it's like, okay, I get it. I get what they're trying to say here, and they're gonna say that everyone is gonna hate this woman because she's an outsider. She's a bloody foreigner. They think she's a bloody foreigner, and that they do all these stereotypes about her, but she's like very attractive, seems normal. But she obviously becomes increasingly mentally ill. So she's working at the department store, and we see that she's smiling at everybody, and everybody kind of gives her this expression. Like she helps this woman find shoes, this ugly woman, and she's like, "Here you go." And the woman like takes the bag, and she's like looking at her. And then it's time for her break, so she goes back in the back, and she heats up her Gingbot, and, then the horrid coworker comes in and says, "Right, it's time for you to go on your break. I gotta go on my break. You gotta get back out there and look at it. You need to watch the counters." Right? And she's like, "But I'm on my break." And she says, "Yeah, but your break's cutting into my break, and that means I'm gonna miss my break. So you're gonna take the rest of your 5 minutes, you're gonna fuck off back out there." Right? And you're like, why take that's the thing. Okay, so that's the thing about America. One of the good things about America, can't think of a single woman in this country, okay? Especially especially working at at a sales job or a retail job. I can't think of especially of a beautiful black woman who would be working in a retail job, and somebody came in and tried to tell her, I'm taking the rest of your 5-minute break. You need to get out there." There is no way they would let that happen. Hell no, bitch. Get back out there, and you're gonna finish I'm gonna finish my break, and then I'll come out there. Like, I like that about this country. That's just not gonna happen. But this poor woman, she can't stand up for herself, so she goes back out there, and, she's selling the stuff, and then the woman comes out, and and by the way, she makes the comment about the food again, which I was, look, I'm not a, a social, what person. Okay. But that comment annoyed me because let the woman eat her food, man. You're obviously trying to make some snide remark about who she is because of the food she's eating. Just let her eat her damn food and shut up. But she says, "Can you not eat that stinky food? I can smell it. It's getting into the leather. The leather shoes are stinking because of your food. Don't you know this is a department store? You can't eat that food in here. Why don't you just get some chips? They got a chippy down the street. You could just get a chippy. Get some mushy peas. Get some mushy peas. Fuck off, right? That's what they say. So, so, so she goes back out. She's working at the counter in the department store, and then they say, "Oh, you got to serve this guy. He's going to come up and ask you some questions. You got to go help him find some stuff. Oh, by the way, did you know he killed his wife? But he's unconvicted. She's unconvicted, right? He's unconvicted. He's not convicted, but we think he killed his wife. You're gonna go talk to him, innit?" So the guy comes up and he says, this guy is a creeper. This guy's a real creeper. You can tell. He comes up and he's all pasty, and he's got his Dahmer drip glasses on, and he says, like, can you help me? I'm trying to buy this. And then so she rings it up and he says, she's like, "That'll be £30." And he's like, £30? I'm a little bit strapped at the moment. Could you help me out? It's like, no, dipshit. Don't try to buy your trainers or whatever if you don't have the money for it. Who are you? Right. So he comes up and then she says, "Okay, I can put it on layaway or whatever. Let me get your name and number." So he gives a name and number, and then of course he says, "I wouldn't mind if you put your name and address down there too, innit?" And she's like, "Ugh." But she has this vision all of a sudden um of grabbing him and like strangling him, and the music turns into I don't know, John Carpenter music, right? And the glass shatters. So of course, when the glass shatters, you know that the character is having a psychic break, right? So that's what happens with the coworker, the Millie coworker. Right, you're a fucking Millie. The Millie coworker. She grabs her and she smashes her face down in the glass cabinet, and she's got glass all in her face. Now that means that the main character, the protagonist, her psyche is fracturing, right? So then anyway, what happens is she goes down into the basement to eat. She's forced to go down in the basement. And when she goes down in the basement, because the manager says, "Well, can you eat in the basement?" It's kind of like an office space, right? We got to, yes. Well, we've got a space down in the office. Can you take care of the cockroach problem while you're down there? Stapler. My stapler. Remember Milton? I'm going to burn this place to the ground. So she goes down in the basement. And when she goes down there, she has like there's one of those rolly desks. And she opens it up and she sits in the desk. She sits down at the desk to eat. And of course, she's surrounded by mannequins. Look, man, let's get something straight here. If if you go and spend your time in basements surrounded by mannequins, you got to get help, dude. Okay, you got to get help because the basement is the basement of your soul. You are regressing into your psyche, and those mannequins are your DID states staring back at you. So she looks at the desk while she's eating her gingbot, and she notices that there are article cuttings of the guy who I guess owned the department store and all these murders that went on. So she starts looking at that. Well, that's not a good sign. And then she looks, and there's what looks like a little domino. And spoiler alert, it ends up being a domino, but it's a little piece of ivory or whatever, and it's got the glyph on it that was on the wall in Beyond the Sea in the murder scene, and it's also the same glyph that occurs as the sigil in Bandersnatch. Okay, which means that it's got two prongs, and this could be it's a rune. It's a rune stone. Okay. It's a rune stone or what looks like a pitchfork or a tuning fork or a witching wand, but nevertheless, it's trying to tell her there's a decision to be made, and she starts to hear voices. So when she hears the voices, when she hears voices, she throws it, and this is clever. We hear the voice that was speaking to her through the glyph, and it's muted. And then she picks it up and it says, "Look, and it's the voice of this guy, and he says, "We're together now. We're bonded. We're bonded. You picked up the glyph. We're bonded, and you have to make a decision. Yes or no. Do you want me to come? Do you want me to manifest into reality? Yes or no? Say yes. Say yes. Say yes. Say yes. Say it. Say yes. Say yes." And so she says yes. Now she had been watching when she went home one night. She'd been watching TV, and she'd seen "Rah Rah Rasputin," right, that song, and like she saw the '70s, ABBA people or whatever, and one of them she thought was particularly sexy, and he looks like Bootsy Collins, like, in a space outfit. So he appears to her, first in his name is Gap, Gaap. So I suppose he is he's like a some sort of Hindi demon, right? And he appears, and when he first appears, you hear snarling, and he's Baphomet. The Baphomet appears to her, and he says, "Okay, that's a little full on. I've manifested myself in my natural form. Let me give you something a little more appealing." So in other words, she's now contacted this demon through a glyph and a runestone, and she said yes because she had the two pronged choices, yes or no. She says yes, so she invites him in, and she's also dissociating because she's been talking to herself. And she saw the mannequins, so she sees like alternate versions of herself and who she wants to be. She's projecting, and then he appears, and of course, he is a yeah. My sister says he's a nice demon, so he's this guy has the veneer of being a nice demon, right? And he tells her that he's here because, and he's played by some English musician. He's a garage musician or something like that in England. But yeah, maybe he is French. I don't know. He's a Jin or something, but it's like a Hindi name. But this is Demon 79. So he appears and he tells her that she now is bonded to this thing and she has no choice to do this. She has to commit 3 murders in within the next 3 days, 1 murder a day, in order to save humanity from ultimate destruction. And then if she doesn't do that, all of humanity will die. Well, look, man, you there's no nice demons. And when the guy comes to you and he's in silvery white outfit with like what is supposed to be wings because like he's wearing this white feathery like shawl thing that kind of makes him look like wings. But we already saw him as Baphomet. You had to invite him in, and he tells you that you have to commit murders in 3 days to save humanity. Well, look, killing one person is killing everybody. Right? So, she's gonna make the decision, and she's doing a human sacrifice for this demon. So, "Lady, you gotta go to church." Right? So, instead, she says, "Alright, I'll do it." And, so they're walking along, and this scene is kind of like in The Good Shepherd because they're walking along a canal, and they come across this guy, and she is, like, in a bathrobe, and she's talking to herself. So, what I really liked about this episode, okay, to be serious here about this episode, what I really liked about this episode was that it depicts, DID mental illness in a way that we see from the other side in a way that I don't think we've seen in many other things. And we've been talking about this a lot recently, and it always pops up and it occurs in a lot of the literature that we've covered in a lot of the movies. I mean, we did this in American Psycho and Clockwork Orange, a lot of these things. But this one was really unique. I really liked how they did this because we see what she sees, and what she sees is that she's talking to a demon, right? That she's contacted. She has this whole backstory. But what everybody else sees is that she's talking to herself and she's schizophrenic. She's schizophrenic or she's got MPD, BPD, DID, whatever. But the fact is, she's talking to like people that aren't there. Okay. Now, this is where, and again, this is brilliant because this is where mental illness and demonic energy fuse in terms of reality or a reality of literature or reality of art. So the demon tells her, "Go on and kill this guy because let me show you a vision." And he touches her, and her eyes roll back into her head. And what This is kind of interesting because instead of her eyes rolling back into her head and we see black marble eyes, which is more accurate, we see the kind of milky eyes of, the prophet, or seeing visions. And she sees a vision of the guy, that this guy is a creeper. Right? So you gotta get rid of this guy. So she picks up a rock and she stones him. So it becomes it's some biblical themes here, right? And she's casting the first stone. And we don't, by the way, we don't know if this is true or not, if the vision that the guy has shown her is a lie. Because first of all, he's been kind of lying to her throughout. And also he is a demon. So why are you listening to him in the first place? And you're doing a literal human sacrifice. So she knocks him over the head, kills him, and he goes into the water and he disappears into the abyss of the water. Um, so that's the first sacrifice, right? Now, she doesn't want to get up in the morning, and he says, "You got to get up. They're gonna know that you're the culprit." Right? So she goes to work, and I don't know, a bunch of stuff happens, and then that night she comes across she's walking near the pub, and she sees, who does she see? She sees the creeper, or the murderer creeper from the, department store, right? The one with the pasty hair. And, he's, like, standing outside the pub, and he's like, "Well, you followed me here. Shall we go and shag?" And this guy is just gross. This guy is a beastly man. She goes back, and he's like, "Go with him. That'll be your second guy." So she goes back to his apartment, or his flat, and, it's, like, just trash and just rubbish everywhere. And he walks in, like, the little sofa's right there, and he says, What, should we just do it right here?" And you're like, "Oh, this guy, he does have to go. This guy's disgusting." Um, and the guy says, the demon tells her, "No, get him upstairs in the bedroom." So they go upstairs in the bedroom, and she's got a, is it the hammer that she's got in that one? She's got a hammer, I think, and she knocks him over the head. She says, "Yeah, you're," because she's trying to pick her murder weapon, and the demon tells her, uh, the demon tells her, "You need a weapon," or whatever, which is, like, very typical of the serial killer, right? You need your skill set. You need your archetypal weapon, that you're gonna use in your demon quest. So she goes upstairs and she kills the guy. Okay, so now that's the second sacrifice. Well, the third sacrifice is gonna be this politician. Okay, so here's where we get a fusion of kind of Silence of the Lambs slash Taxi Driver slash Mark David Chapman, John Hinckley Jr., the DID. Uh, I mean, those are MK Ultra, monarchs, but the DID person is now going to go after. She's programmed to kill, and she's going to go after the politician. Now, the politician is really a Thatcherite David Cameron guy who is running for the National Front, which stands in for the BNP in England, and he's basically saying, um, "We need our community." Listen, no, he's more like this. Listen, people, we need our community to be homogeneous, right? None of these bloody foreigners, right? Of course, this is, post height of the British colonial empire, where they were bringing in all the people from the ends of the empire, and they did it to themselves, and so now they reap what they sow, and of course, everybody in this town looks disgusting anyway. They all look like little, ghoulish troll people, their eyes all, looking at everybody. And she actually looks fairly nice early on. She's like a normal looking person. But of course, they're all looking at her because she's the foreigner. And so the demon tells her, "You need to get rid of this guy who's running for, he wants to be a PM or whatever. He wants to be an MP, I'm sorry, a member of parliament." So, um, so yeah, that song by The Dream, Abyss, Abyss. Just said it twice. So it's a song by The Dream, The Dream. So anyway, so she goes to the pub, and there's a detective looking for her because she's been following the serial killer guy. Now she's got to go after the politician. And so the detective is following her while she's following the politician, the David Cameron kind of Thatcherite guy. And she runs him off the road, and she runs up to him and she hammers him on the head. And you think that she's going to kill him, because this is her third sacrifice, and she's got minutes to go or whatever, but she gets stopped, and also she made the demon go away. He, like, was incinerated in a pile of ash and disappeared. Well, what's interesting about this is that when they go back to the police station, again, it's clever because when they're questioning her at the police station, there's this horrible bird woman detective who's like, "Uh, well, uh, so what happened then?" Right? Huh. And when the when the protagonist is telling them what happened, she's telling them a literal series of events about how Gap came to her, the demon gave her a sigil. She hands over the glyph, and now it is a domino. And of course, it was a domino from the beginning because it was a series of domino events. Like she starts one event, and then it creates a domino effect, right? Or like a butterfly effect, right? Because it's the two sides, the two hemispheres of her brain that are melting away in this psychic abyss, no, psychic breaking of her personality. And um, so her testimony or when she's telling the police is obviously to her true. Now we can see that again, this is like depicting the other side of events in a clever way that we haven't seen in a lot of other films or TV series. So I thought that was clever. But what's really clever is that she watches the clock strike midnight. So it's also a little bit of Cinderella. It's like a reverse Cinderella because I guess the three fairy godmothers, three ritual sacrifices, she carried on a journey. Um, and I don't know, that's probably not an accurate extension of that metaphor, but she watches the clock strike midnight and she thinks that the world's going to end and it doesn't. Well, then another detective comes in and says, "You got to see this." And they walk outside and they see the George W. nukes. They see the Reagan nukes falling, and he says, "Oh no, they've done it. They've done it." And then Gap appears. So that's her prince, I guess, right? And her glass slipper was her what? What was her slipper? Her hammer or her knife? So her prince appears and he says he's a demon and he says, "Look, I've been kicked out of this committee. I was going through a ritual initiation into the demonic realm, like getting you to do this, but they've kicked me out and now I can't even be in hell. He has to be in oblivion. So he's going to be obliterated as if he never existed in the first place." But he says he read the bylaws and it doesn't say anything about not bringing anybody with him. So he offers her a chance to go into oblivion. So they kind of join hands and they walk out of the sunset into oblivion. So it's a reversal of the Western story where the hero or the heroine walks into the sunset and everything's okay. Like end of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, they ride into the sunset, right? The cowboy story, or the end of the Green Berets. They famously did that at the end of the Green Berets, the John Wayne movie, where he joins hands with the little Viet boy and everything's going to be all right. And it's like, no, they're breaking your country. It's terrible. But in this, I guess they walk again, they walk out of the sunset because she's Eastern. I guess she's Eastern, so they're not walking into the West. So she's turning against the Western ideal, I guess. And they walk into oblivion and the world ends. So, in other words, in the story, the thing that happened really did happen. So I thought that was pretty clever. So that was Demon 79. And again, that one is my favorite of season 6 because I thought it was very clever. And again, a movie to watch um if you want to see more of that would be this movie right here. It's 2018. It's called In Fabric. And this is a very clever movie. I think it's an A24 movie. And I will drop that link for the IMDb because it's English and it's by Peter Strickland and it's pretty well done. So I would check that out. It's called In Fabric because it's kind of a longer version of this. Okay, if you want me to say that word one more time, why don't you drop some super chats in there? Drop me some super chats. Drop me some. I'll say the word. Well, I won't say any word, but I will say the word. Oh, I got a message from DPH there. I'll say the words that you want me to say. Chats, people, and smash that like. We've got. Oh, before I forget, yo, who dropped $1. Our biggest supporter, Jason. He is our most frequent basement breathalyzer here. Thank you so much. Also, shouts out to Michelle on PayPal. Really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Let's see. We got another. There was somebody came in today. Yo, shouts out to where'd it go? Where'd it go? I think that was Adam, friend Adam. Adam dropped a yeah. Yep, there it is. Shouts out. Oh, shouts out. Yes, Jason. Shouts out to Adam who dropped a mega fat chat today for sponsoring a stream. Much Adam, really appreciate you. And shouts out to our homeboy Maddie out there. Maddie dropped us dropped me a very nice donation. Dropped me $20 the other night on PayPal. Really appreciate you. Is my audio crackling? Is my audio okay? Is my audio good? Let me know if my audio's good. I think everything looks okay. Hopefully it's not too bad. That might just be my crackling. Oh yeah. Yeah, we're freezing here. Give me a second here, people. If you're watching this later, then it'll be okay. It'll fix it. That might just be that running in the background. Let's see. We should be all right here. Yeah, we got a good stream health, so I think it was just the thing running in the background. A window I didn't close. So let me know when we're good again. Should be okay. Switch off NOB. I don't know what that is. I don't know what NOB is. Switch on. Switch on OB. I don't know what OB is. Talking about OBS. That's what I'm running through. Are we good? Are we good? All right. So I'm gonna keep going here. I'm gonna keep rolling because I think we're okay. Good. Thank you. Thank you. I think it was just I had a window open in the background. Okay, so the I guess I should talk about the movie. I'll say Bandersnatch for last. So the movie that I watched a couple days ago is a cult classic from 1993, and it's called BRAINSCAN. Now, BRAINSCAN is 1993. It is. You gotta drop me some fat chats if you want me to say words. Um, 1993, and this movie is it stars Edward Furlong and Frank Langella, and it's decent. I saw this with my best friend in the movie theater when I was 12 years old. So no, was I 12? No, maybe it was is the movie. See, it's 1993 or four. I was 13 when I saw it. I was 13. We went and saw this, and we thought it was the coolest movie of all time at the time because it's about this kid. It's about Edward Furlong. He was still cool at the time because of Terminator 2. And like I went out and got one of those shirts that like has a hood on it, but it's a shirt, and it was very 90s. I don't know. And so he is living at home and he has no parents. He has his dad is absent and he's like left him at this house, and he's got the coolest room of all time. His room is He's got like a 1993 version of like a gamer chair, but it's like a leather chair with speakers on it. And he's got this big TV. He's got this like water tower and all these screens and monitors everywhere that are very 90s. And he's got an AI system that runs in his house called Igor. And this is super cool um because Igor Igor is the uh we're talking about Frankenstein, but Igor is like the system that runs his phones and his internet. So basically, he'll be like, Kristen says, I spent $250 on sponsor streams and nobody's producing it. Well, we're working on it, damn it. No, thank you, Chris. We're working on it, and I'm working on it, and I've got a bunch of sponsor streams in the work, but I'm working on it. So, Yeah, so please continue to support me so that I can continue to work on those. Everybody else out there, not Kristen, because Kristen has spent considerable fortune on supporting me. So I thank you so much, everybody. So anyway, so the AI system is running his phone lines in his basic like pre AOL. So like for instance, he'll say, call Linda or whatever. And, you know, that's not the girl across the street. She's got a hotter name than that. But she and he'll say when he gets off the phone, he'll say, later, Igor. And then he'll go, yes, master. And it'll hang up. So 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 anyway, what happens is who's the English hack? View says, hate this English hack. Who's the English hack? So so then what happens is basically we find out that Edward Furlong has been through again a traumatic brain injury situation um, where you hate these tech averse humanities majors. Okay, I don't know what that means. Um, so he's been through a traumatic brain injury, and he realized that he kind of dissociates because he's been in a car accident with his mother, and he flashes back to the time when his leg has been busted because he is dragging himself uh, through the rain, and he sees his dead mom, and he's like the flashing lights are sort of they're starting to trigger him into a state of dissociation. Now that's going to play into I'm not just throwing that out there. Basically, like he and his friend Kyle are into like role playing video games like again this is like gamification, right? So he hears about this thing called BrainScan, and he orders it from, some technical logistics company, and he gets a CD-ROM of this video game, and this guy, basically, he sits back, and he's been spying, by the way, on the hot neighbor across the street who's his age or older, and he does the weird, like, American what's the Kevin Spacey movie? American I can't think of it. Anyway, where the guy is filming the plastic bag and he's filming her. So, uh, that is that's what he's doing, but she wants to talk to him, he wants to talk to her, but he's not able to talk to girls, so it's kind of like proto incel. So instead, he sits home and he plays games, and he orders brain scan, and then this demon appears to him, and the demon's name is Trickster. But it was cool back then because Trickster appears and is like, "Oh, you've got the worst taste. You need to put on some good music." And he puts on Primus, and that was really cool at the time. He's got Aerosmith "Living on the Edge" posters in 1993 and Primus, and like that was cool. But basically, what happens? American Beauty. Thank you. Gosh, some dork in the chat threw me off. So, so what happened was, he he goes on this role playing game, and the and he has to accomplish a series of tasks, and he goes and he basically becomes a serial killer. He goes through the series of tasks in the maze of his own mind because when he plays the video game, he is like asleep. There's a neural link. There's neural link technology that appears through flashing lights, which is mimicking the flashing lights of the of the car crash, and he has to kill this guy in a home invasion. So he sees himself in a first player game. It's kind of like I don't know, Ready Player One, Snow Crash, and we've covered Snow Crash, and and he has to like cut off the guy's foot as a trophy. Well, he goes back home and he realizes that when he wakes up, that Frank Angela, who is, by the way, the absolute worst cop to be on your trail, because Frank Langella, who plays Boris Balkan in the Ninth Gate, is like on his trail, and he comes in and he says to him like, I understand you. You know, you're a strange kid, don't get to talk to a lot of people, but if there's something off about you, I'm gonna find it. And you're like, oh my gosh. And also, Edward Furlong in the movie, he's not really an incel because he does have friends. He does have a whole series of IRL friends, because he's got a horror club at school. But of course, there's a there's a principal of this really nice public school. It's like a headmaster in a skull and bones bow tie. Says, "I have to I'm gonna have to approve everything that you wanna watch from now on, especially blood, 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 or whatever you were showing, this trash." So it's kind of like a '90s version of before the parental advisory sticker, and before, like, everything was completely depraved. They're watching old black and white horror movies and their horror club on their activities period, and this guy says that's not cool. So, none of the adults support him or like him. His mom's gone. He never talks to his dad, and he always got his Igor and his friend Kyle. Um, well, then he ends up basically. I'll try to make this short. He ends up basically killing his friend Kyle as one of the tasks, and he has to get away. A dog digs up the foot and shows some walker in a tracksuit in the woods. And then he goes home and then he looks in his fridge and he's got all the body parts as Ted Bundy trophies in his fridge. And he realized that Trickster is a Loki trickster Satan demon and has tricked him into again committing human sacrifices for a task that he will never accomplish. And he has to keep going. Well, in the end, um, he gets out of it and he kills the demon or whatever. And then at the end of the film, um, he goes to the principal's office and he hands him a copy of the video game because he wakes up. He wakes up with a party going on outside. He wakes up and he realizes it's kind of a take on the, "Oh, it was all a dream," but the dream was that he was neuralinked into the video game, so it was all a, first person player Doom game, and none of it was real. But the question is, was it real? Because it made him dissociate and do these things, and he thinks he was asleep. Right? So mental illness combined with trauma, combined with this demon, combined with video games, or was it a dream? And no matter what happens, he decides to change his life. He goes over to the party, he talks to the girl, he gets a girlfriend, his friend is alive, and everything's cool. And then in the last scene, he goes and gives the BrainScan game to the headmaster, and and he says, "Here's a game for you to approve, but you have to watch it." And he knows that the headmaster is going to watch the video game, and therefore he will also be sucked into the game. And then Trickster reappears, and there's the demon, but Edward Furlong lives. Now, one of the things about this movie is that the I know the director did not like working with Edward Furlong because he said this kid can't act. Well, actually, actually, he's perfect for this role because he's playing an awkward teenager who is having a hard time acting in his, like, own skin. Also, the character is not comfortable in his own skin because of what he's been through. So it's actually the form and the content actually work together in this. So he actually acts the movie perfectly because I mean, and I guess the proof of that is that, like, when I was 13 and I watched it, I thought it was super cool, right? Because even at 13, you can tell when the movie sucks, and this movie didn't suck back then. Now watching it now, you look back at it and you're like, "Oh, this is cheesy," but it's one of those movies where it's so bad that it's actually good, and it's actually and this is only related to this is related to Black Mirror because, of course, Joan is Awful was about this. Demon 79 in a way is about this. All of Black Mirror is about people who are trying to understand reality, but through a mirror darkly, right? And they are trying to contact another version of reality. A lot of this plays into metaverse and into coon pods and all that stuff. Um, but I think that this movie's cool because it also predicts it's called BrainScan. This movie predicts the gamification of society in terms of being a star in your own video game. And the video game bleeds over into reality. And we see this in the way that social media plays into this and the way that that the mass events are often blamed on gamification, right? Or the way that war games are played out in real time in terms of psyops. So I think that it's It's an interesting movie, if not just for the very fact that it's also about a character who is, you know, going through a state of trying to figure out who they are, but at the same time dissociating. Now, a lot of that could be we could talk about the Gnostic themes and all that stuff, but this is it's not. I mean, in a way, it's Gnostic because Trickster is a kind of a demiurge who's telling him to break on through to the other side, and you need to get in contact with the creator, and you figure out your own reality, and reality is not what you see, but actually the reality that he's living in is so suppose there are some Gnostic themes to that. But I think that it certainly ties into Black Mirror in a number of ways, and it definitely ties in with the last thing that we're going to cover, and that is Bandersnatch. So, has anybody seen the Netflix movie Bandersnatch, which I avoided at the time? I had no interest in it. I just wasn't interested in another choose your own adventure thing. I thought it was played out, but actually I go back and watch it and I go, "No, this is actually pretty original." Because it wasn't the first choose your own adventure in terms of movies or television shows, but it's interesting how it plays into Netflix as a meta reality. Have you guys seen that? Okay. So, Bandersnatch. Bandersnatch is the 2019, it is a 2019 choose your own adventure, um, role-playing movie. Okay, now, this one is really well done. I think that this is probably the best of the shouts out to, Joe, who just dropped $10 on Venmo and said, "Great stuff. Great stuff. Thank you, Joe. Really appreciate that." If you want to support me, you can drop some super chats or you can drop me those direct donations. Really appreciate you. So Bandersnatch, yeah, Bandersnatch is really well done, I think, because the way that I first watched it was I just let it run. I didn't do any of the choosing and I just saw where it took me. And I was really interesting. I thought it was really interesting because certain scenes recur in the movie and the credits appear at different times in the television show, so it becomes nonlinear. Now, here's what the movie's about. So, it's set in 1984, of course. So, this is unique because we think we're going back in time in terms of Black Mirror, because Black Mirror is usually set in the future. It's kind of unlike, um, Twilight Zone in the sense that it's not just the future, it's like the future past, and the story becomes nonlinear. I know there are episodes that are like that. Jerry's the expert on Twilight Zone, but, it is very Twilight Zone-esque, but, um, it's 1984, so we get 1984 literary connotations where we're gonna see some sort of weird dystopian future, but what's interesting is that it depicts England in 1984 as the sort of clockwork or orange dystopia where everything is the same. Again, it's drab. It's this, Thatcherite Birmingham row house, just shit town where everything is just it's just glum, right? And we get this kid, and he wakes up again. It's the beginning of the story, so he wakes up, and we see that he is designing a video game based on a book called Bandersnatch, and it's a cult book by some mysterious author, and basically the author we find out is this guy who we're going to find this. I'm going to kind of skip ahead here because the story's not linear anyway. So we're going to find out that the author of this book was obsessed with making his way through a maze and a choose your own adventure book, right? And so he got obsessed with the book. And then we find out that he was being dosed, with, of course, with LSD because it becomes MK Ultra. But he's been dosed with drugs by his wife, and that he eventually gets in contact with a demon who gives him a glyph, and the glyph is again the symbol that you see in the thumbnail, and it's the one that's painted on the wall in Beyond the Sea, and it's the one that guides the protagonist in Demon 79. So it's essentially a pitchfork tuning fork rune where every choice is yes, no. So that mimics the fact that he is making binary decisions on a computer because he's programming, right? So he's got ones and zeros, yeses and nos, up, down, left, right, and he makes a decision. And he can only go left, right, and there's no straight line. There's no straight line through the maze. So, but he starts to see this thing everywhere, and that he has contacted this demon, and the demon's name is Pax. And Pax, it's interesting because Pax is peace, but but it's obviously a lie because the video game and the demon are lying to him, just like the demon lies in Demon 79. And Pax is this kind of lion-headed, uh, squanchy glop demon with vampire teeth that is very 80s. It's very Dungeons and Dragons to me. And I also thought of the demon Pan. Um, not this is not Pan as in like Baphomet Pan, but the demon Pan, who was a specific demon that came out of the Ouija board that Ted Hughes and Sylvia Plath contacted. I was reading again about that the other day about how um Ted Hughes was obsessed with anthropology, vegetation right, J.G. Frazier, um Gnostic, occult lore, and like this sort of, unconscious mind from which the poet would draw his words. That sort of ties into our American God stream because we talked about how Odin brings in Nordic lore, Odin brings the runes, the runic language to people by hanging upside down on Yggdrasil, the world tree, and the language that he gives people is the runic language, which functions as 3 things, right? Which is like spells, um, runic spells, language, and then poetry. Like the way that you arrange the runes determines the syntax of a poetic line. And the runes are interesting because runes are shaped the way they are because they're easy to carve into stone touchdowns. Well, that's essentially what we get in this. And also, when there's a story about Sylvia Plath and Ted Hughes after they'd contacted this demon who said his name was Pan on a Ouija board, and apparently Pan possessed Ted Hughes. She was sure that he was possessed by this demon, and that at one point they were sitting in a meadow on a hill, and he suddenly turned to her and he had black eyes and he strangled her, and she thought she was going to die, and then he turns away and then acted like nothing had happened. Um, so that's in her in Sylvia Plath's diaries. So anyway, so what happens is um the kid is trying to base a video game on this. So he's got an appointment at a software company called Tuckersoft. And he goes to this little, place in town. I guess he's in London, and there's a kind of a shaman guru type of guy that runs the place. He's got a ponytail and he's like, he's got Dahmer drip glasses on, of course. That's all over the series. And that's occurring in like so many things I'm watching now. Dahmer drip glasses, right? The serial killer drip. Um, so this guy says, okay, well, it's interesting. You want to go over here and meet this guy. And the guy that he meets is that guy, Will Poulter, who's in a bunch of stuff. He's really funny. This guy's really interesting in the show. He's got his hair dyed blonde and he's got Dahmer drip glasses on. And he's got all these monitors in front of him. They're 80s monitors. And he says, this kid's, he made enough to afford a Lamborghini last year, but he still works here. And the first thing the kid says when he meets him is, we've met before, haven't we? Which is showing you that there's gonna be some sort of eternal return involved in this story. And so then anyway, he has to go pitch his game, and Will Poulter's character basically has invented, kind of a Tetris. So this is pre-Nintendo, and and it's an English version, but it's showing that, like, this is a game where it also, by the way, the game that they show is it has a Yakin and Boaz, twin towers, and there's a character falling in between them. And the way that he falls obviously is kind of linear, so it's kind of like Tetris. But that's gonna foreshadow what happens to him later in the movie, right? Because there's gonna be a decision that you as the viewer have to make on who's gonna defenestrate themselves from this apartment. Well, anyway, the protagonist has invented a game that is three-dimensional. So or I guess it would be two-dimensional. One I guess what's so one dimensional would be up and down, right? But then his game, somebody educate me on this, but his game is two-dimensional because he can choose which way to go forward. So it's the first video game where the character is not going up and down, he's actually going forward into the screen. So what's interesting about that is while the character in the video game is going into the screen, the protagonist is going into his dreams and into his own game, and we are going into the screen of watching those 2 levels of reality happen. So it becomes a meta reality. So they say, basically, like, this is groundbreaking. Where do you wanna work on this? And that's your first decision that you have to make as the viewer, and you use your remote and you pick which one you wanna do. Do, you wanna accept the offer and work at the place, or do you wanna deny it and work from home? So that was funny because this came out in 2019, and it's about a person working on a computer from home, right, before 2020. Now, I know that existed already, but of course, that became a thing in 2020, right? And what's also funny is that we're watching this from home. So you have to constantly remember and be aware that in while watching the film, you are a character in the film because you're choosing what happens, right? So so then what happens is, no matter what you choose, he's gonna, let's just say he goes home and he works on this thing and he becomes obsessed with it and he keeps making versions of the video game and we see a sort of groundhog day situation where he makes the video game but it turns out to be shit and they do a really weird review on television and they give the movie the video game bad reviews and it's like 6.99 6 quid for this cassette game and it's just not groundbreaking. So he becomes obsessed with his work, so his life is mimicking the creator of Bandersnatch, the book, right? Well, um, so flash forward to it doesn't, it's not working out, and the kid, by the way, is living at home with his dad. I thought that was interesting that there's a lot of in Black Mirror, there's a lot of either um people living with 2 parents or people living at home with a dad, which is kind of a flip of what we see in terms of societal reality, but also in terms of artistic, depiction. Because we're gonna see that, the BRAINSCAN, he's living without parents, but his dad is alive, and in this, um, he is living with his dad, but his dad seems off, and I knew I knew right away what was gonna happen with his dad because of what they said about the fact that the guy who made Bandersnatch was dosed by his family. I figured this would be an MK Ultra movie, and I was right. So spoiler alert. So what ends up happening is that we learn, at least in one of the paths, that his dad keeps taking the kid to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist is this hot lady who, when you're watching it, you're like, is she like being sexual here? What's happening here? And she's got these very bright eyes, and it ends up that she is really. But what I predicted was that his dad keeps taking him to this weird place and locking a door in the house. And of course, the house always functions as a symbol of the psyche in the movie. So there's a locked door in his memory. And eventually, the protagonist breaks into the locked office and he finds a safe inside a cabinet. And there's a 3-letter password to open the safe. And the safe is going to be the safe inside the locked cabinet, inside the locked room of his mind palace. So, what's he going to use to unlock his psyche? What's the 3-letter code that he's going to use? Pax, right? Pax the demon. Now, Will Poulter, by the way, told him that Pac-Man, he's gonna later tell him that Pac-Man is the archetypal video game on which all this stuff is based, but it's not the game that you think it is. And he makes a good point here. I thought this was really cool. He says, everybody thinks Pac-Man is a happy game because it looks like a pizza pie that's had a piece cut out of it. Well, just taking that from what we know now, right? You would think, oh no, if it's got that involved, this is gonna be a terrible. Well, it is because the character is in a maze and he's stuck on one board and he cannot leave. And when he tries to leave reality and go to the right, he ends up just going in a loop and coming back to the left on the other side. and he's haunted by ghosts, right? Um, and so he has to choose his path, but a lot of times the maze functions as a kind of circular. I mean, it's in the form of a rectangle. So again, it's the Black Mirror, it's a rectangle, but you have to choose kind of mathematical linear paths in order to get through the maze, like in The Shining, right? With Jack chasing Danny through the maze, or like trying to make your way through the maze away from the Minotaur. And of course, the Minotaur is kind of the Pax demon. Well, he says that Pac-Man actually stands for program and control. So the character, when you think about the character in the video game, it's not happy because it can only live in terms of predetermined paths. So this is like predestination, predetermination, and running on a kind of computer model of life, like in a simulation. Well, obviously, Pac-Man is a simulation, right? And it's like that the character, if the character is you because you're playing the character, it can only do what you tell it to do. It has no reality outside of itself. So then he goes on to tell the protagonist that that's what reality is, that our entire existence is a programmed reality, and that we are living inside of some kind of computer simulation. But it's not as cringe as you think it is, because it's not the kind of computer simulation where, oh, we're in the Elon Musk Matrix simulation. It's actually, he gets a message later from Pax the demon on the monitor that tells him, because he asks him, "What is this? Where am I? And why do I keep waking up and going back through reality and turn in this eternal return?" And he gets a message because he invites the demon in, and the message on the computer screen says, "This is Netflix." This was really cool. Um, and he says, "What is that? What is Netflix?" And then it tells him it's a streaming platform. And then he says, "What is a streaming platform?" So then you realize that the kid or the guy is programming the video game. The video game is actually just the avatar of himself, and that his avatar on the screen is us because we are choosing his decisions for him. So we're watching Netflix watch him, watch himself, watch the video game. Does that make sense? He's in a wilderness of mirrors, as James Jesus Angleton says, right? The head of counterintelligence at the CIA. A wilderness of mirrors. He can't determine what is what, which way is up, which way is down, left, right, and those are the only directions that he has, right? So, the way that he does that, by the way, is Will Poulter. First he gives him some of that devil's lettuce, right? They're smoking devil's lettuce in the moonlight in there. And, then he gives them some LSD. They trip acid, and they take the tabs have Pax the demon on it, and then he kind of starts to see trails, and, he gets in touch with reality, man. But then that's when, it comes to the decision who is to defenestrate themselves, and you choose Will Poulter, and he says, "But you'll die." And Will Poulter says, "No, I won't, because we're in a video game and it doesn't matter, and I'm gonna come back again the next day." And that's exactly what happens. But the real, like, revelatory thing about this is that it's like Polybius, because you find out that when he unlocked the safe, right, inside of his dad's closet, he found files, and the files were his psychiatric files, and it turns out that this kid has been a test subject. He's been a Montauk Project test subject since he was a kid. You don't even know if the dad is his real dad. So what happened was, the the can't remember if the mother was purposefully murdered in front of him in a trauma bonding situation in order to break his psyche and program his other personality. But we see that in his memory, when he goes into the psychiatric appointment and talks to the doctor, the camera pans back and we see that it's a set, and that there are cameras watching him, and that he's inside of a warehouse. And that when the dad drops him off at the psychiatrist when he's older, it's really in the city, but it's also set up for observation, just like an MK Ultra facility. And that he's been being dosed his whole life, just, I mean, it's pure MK Ultra, So, like, he remembers back when the dad offered him cookies, and, uh, and we see the dad dosing the cookies with LSD or with, I don't know, with, Seconal or, scopolamine or something, and, giving them to the kid and then watching what he creates. So his goal, his path, the video game of his life is to create this video game. But it's also an MK Often situation. Remember MK Often, MK Naomi, Subproject 119, John Marks, where the MK Ultra activity starts to turn into dissociation and contact with demonic occult energy in order to not create a Manchurian candidate, but to see where this Montauk Project kid goes. It's like Stranger Things in a way. Um, so we make all these decisions and we decide, what to do. Are we going to pour the pee all over the computer? Are we going to smash the dad in the head? Are we going to smash the video game? But in the end, he ends up creating this kind of perfect video game, and it goes viral. And in other words, we learn that again, we get a situation where a character has to suffer and go through a programmed descent into madness in order to create something for everyone else, which is observable. So again, we're observing them through the black mirror, but the difference is that in Bandersnatch, we're observing the entire situation and we, the viewer, are making the decisions. So in the other Black Mirror episodes, we see the end result of that a lot of times, or we see the backstory. But in this, it's different because we get a non-linear narrative where we're able to make the decisions for how the story is going to turn out. So I thought that that was really, really clever, and I like that. I like that they use the title of the movie as a nonsense term. I don't like nonsense where I've said that before. If anybody's watched long enough back for me to see that say that randomly in other places, but I hate nonsense words when especially when they're used in relation to children's literature. I think there's something demented and probably demonic about that. It's really because it comes from Jabberwocky and that creep. Um and the Rabbit Hole and Alice in Wonderland and I hate Dr. Seuss stuff. I've always hated that since I was a kid. I had a natural repulsion to that sort of thing, and I still do. Now, I do like that they do that in this because the form and the content fit because it's a nonsense word because his worldview and his reality is nonsense, right? And he has to sort of contact the other side where this demon lives in order to create this video game. But again, the point is that it's revelatory. I don't like that it does that, but I like how the show depicts that, and we see where we have MK Ultra, the occult, um, metaverse, Maze Mind. Remember Mazey Day? Mazey Day. Her mind is a maze. It meanders. But it's also mazy because her mind is fractured. So it's a maze. It's the same thing with Danny in The Shining, who he has The Shining because he has been through the um the psychosexual torture trauma at the Eyes Wide Shut facility with Jack Torrance, right? And the place is haunted by the demonic energy of the place, just like in the latest Stranger Things episode, where the character is avatared by the demon on the other side, the number one demon, right? Who was in the MK Ultra facility, and who uses 11 to break on through to the other side. But when he takes over and inhabits the body of the cheerleader girl in the latest Stranger Things episode, they literally find the portal to the other side because of the negative psychic energy of the place. That's where they find the portal to the upside down. Right. And I also think that there's something to that. Um, I think that ghosts are fake. I think that's lame. I think that if there are ghosts, they are demons, and that's the sort of leftover residual demonic energy of a particularly traumatic event that sort of fractures space time, right? Because I mean, just think about it anecdotally. Like, think about it in your own mind. Like, if you've ever been in a car wreck or something, it's like you're living your life. and everything's going on this trajectory. And then 5 minutes later, your life is completely changed forever. And if you had just done one thing differently, if you just taken one extra second, or that car had not swerved, or you just made some other decision, it wouldn't have happened. But the fact is, it did happen. And it's hard to reconcile that that happened. It's like when someone dies in your life, right? When someone you care about is gone all of a sudden, it's hard to reconcile that you're still here and that they're not, and they don't exist anymore. It's like they just blipped out and they're gone. And I think that there's that's that's a strange thing, to understand about reality, that everyone who's ever lived has died. But I think that Black Mirror does a pretty good job of, you know, making a dramatic narrative based on those kind of themes. And so I don't know if they'll come up with anything in the future related to that, but I thought that this was a pretty good season. One thing is this. I think that I'm glad to do this kind of work, so that if so other people like don't have to watch this stuff. Yeah, that's cool. Or to read books so that other people don't have to. But I think that it's important for us as human beings to experience, to understand art and to use our powers of creative thinking and discernment to look at things objectively. Now, we can't help but be subjective or impressionistic in terms of our human experience, and to feel pain at what we see. It's like when you watch Avatar. I was talking about Avatar too. And my sister was like, she didn't want to, and it's understandable. She didn't want to watch it the because of the things that happen to the whales in the movie. And I think that that's fine. That's totally cool. In fact, I had the same thought. I think that it's also important though that, if it's not that as an example, that we're sort of bombarded with these things anyway, so we're oversensitized, and that creates a sort of desensitized reality in a lot of other people. But I think that it's important to not to experience everything you can, but I'm saying to watch movies and to read books to understand, number 1, what the culture or the culture war is showing us, what they are predicting for the future, what they're revealing in terms of revelation of the method, where and a lot of these, look, I understand a retort to that would be, yeah, but it's the same thing over and over, and it is. But there's nothing new under the sun. I mean, we have to live life and experience the things that we do. And so I think that, you know, just it's important to watch things and to both feel things deeply as a human and to judge them and whether they're good or bad, right? Or whether they're, disgusting or repugnant or beautiful, but also to hold an objective view at the same time that says, okay, but they're doing this. So in other words, logic and your feelings kind of exist in these two modes, and you have to be able to have both, right? Because we're not stupid people, right? I think that a lot of the audience that this Netflix stuff is made for is just kind of, mud bog people who they just stack mud all day at the office, or whatever they do. I don't know. I don't know what most people do. But but that's who it's made for. It's just like television, internet sludge that you just watch and sort of you're programmed to as you think you're being deprogrammed. But you have to watch it with an active mind. But at the same time, you also have to have the ability, like a lot of people, a lot of you guys do, which is, you know what, I'm not going to watch this anymore. This is just shit. I don't need to watch this, and that's fine too. But I would just say, you know, well, I'd say probably all of us, anybody watching this, has an open mind. In terms of okay, let's see what they do now. Not an open mind in terms of, oh, I'm going to accept what they're going to give me. You don't have to accept anything that they give you. But yes, Thomas Henderson says, "Stretch our horizons, but don't spread ourselves too thin." Good point. That's a concise way of saying all my blathering thoughts there. So, thank you, everybody. That's my Black Mirror season 6 plus 1 episode of season 5 analysis, plus plus brain scan. I also talked a little bit about the Covenant And, Operation Fortune, the Guy Ritchie movie, that's a good movie. I would watch Covenant, because it's a war movie and because it's it's a war movie, it's a Guy Ritchie movie. Um, I like Guy Ritchie. You know, one thing I like about Guy Ritchie is that he makes movies that are you know, for the most part, I mean, there's some other things in there. I think that the things that aren't like manly in his movies are sort of tongue in cheek or ironical. So that's, you know, it's funny. It's just a sense of humor. But I do like that there is a sort of a spirit of traditional manliness, like in his movies. I appreciate that. So, for instance, in Operation Fortune, Rose de Guerre, weird title, but it's a Jason Statham movie. One of the things I liked about the movie is that Jason Statham plays Jason Statham, and so when he's fighting people in the movie, he's just fighting them. And they go hard and they fight. And there's not really any of the stupid thing where like, oh, we both have guns, but we're gonna put the guns down and we're gonna fight a hand to hand because we're gonna see who wins. It's like that's not reality. And the bad guys, you know, just get the fight over with. And you know, they choreograph the fight and stuff, but I like that he does that in movies that he, you know, Jason Statham fights hard, and I like that. I like that. It's entertaining. You know what I mean? I think that that's cool. Uh, literally every time I watch a mainstream show, I think this show's for micro. Oh, bro, I didn't realize you were micro machines. Whoa, I didn't know you were Gub Gub's Gub Gub Slug People is even better. I didn't know you were a Gub Gub Snail Man. Um, Yeah, Rock and Rolla is a I love Rock and Rolla. I think it's a great movie. And you know what? I need to do a stream on somebody I think sponsored a Kurt Russell stream recently. I need to look back at that. But they wanted me to do Big Trouble in Little China. So I might a way I might do that is to do Big Trouble in Little China mixed in with Death Proof and a couple of other Kurt Russell movies. Because Kurt Russell obviously is awesome and Death Proof, in my opinion, Death Proof is probably Quentin Tarantino. I mean, I love Pulp Fiction. That's my favorite Quentin Tarantino movie, um, but I think that and Jackie Brown is underrated, but I think that Death Proof is probably his best movie because it's the most fun and it's got the best climax and it's got the best denouement. That's a great movie. If you haven't seen Death Proof, my sister and I watch that annually together because it's so good and it's fun. It's also Death Proof, by the way also has the, you should watch the video on, want me to look it up for you? It's, Kristen, you're probably gonna like that. You're probably gonna like this. It is let me see. I don't know if you've seen this. It's about the programmed assassin and, mm, no, that's not it. They might have scrubbed it. It's the programmed assassin, MK Ultra, and Death Proof in the movie Telephone. So let me see if they got rid of it. Hold on a second. Let's change the filter. A lot of times you get nope. No, that's not. No, they still have it, but it's in French. So I don't know if I'm gonna be able to find it. You guys might want to look that up. See if you can find it if it's still there. It is Telephone, Telephone, the Charles Bronson movie. It's like Nordberg in Naked Gun. Yeah, and it's somebody did a video a long time ago about programmed assassins and the correlation between the movie Telephone and Death Proof, because Death Proof also does have the remember it's got Rose McGowan in it, and there's a scene where the girl sort of dissociates and there's the butterfly. She's got the butterfly, she's following the butterfly, and then there's a ringtone that plays. And so there's something about I forget the video about that, but it is it's a good video to watch. So so Bill says Bandersnatch breakdown reminded me of one of the scene in Funny Games with Naomi Watts. Yeah, So, Funny Games is a highly disturbing movie with, uh hold on. What's the guy's name? He's in Last Days, the Gus Van Sant movie. Um, he plays a good Kurt Cobain. And let's see, the soundtrack is yeah, it's by Michael Haneke, the French guy. And it's like a sort of a Clockwork Orange set in the '90s, futuristic, all white psychiatric uniform killers version of these two psychotic killers with Michael Pitt. And it's actually a remake of is it a remake of the guy who did Straw Dogs? It's like Straw Dogs, and I just remember the soundtrack too. The soundtrack is by, like, John Zorn. No, is it Warren Zevon? Somebody with a Z. God, I can't think of anybody's name. Now I gotta look that up. Let me see. Hold on. Is it Zorn? Zorn Funny Games. John Zorn, that's it. Yeah, John Zorn. And also, by the way, I'll just share this. Yeah, that's just the Wikipedia. Also, yeah, John Zorn. The soundtrack is crazy to that movie. Also, another movie that's like that is the movie Cache. You guys should watch Cache, which was like a 2005 movie. I saw it when I was in Europe. Which is another one of these hyper, hyper ultra violence movies. Was very disturbing. But there's something about the kind of movie that resulted from Killing Zoe. Remember Killing Zoe was like that. It was like the first '90s movie that was a sort of ultra-violent movie set in France with a French touch, kind of techno soundtrack. I think it's directed by Roger Avary. Yeah, Cache. It's directed by Roger Avary, and that's a great movie. It's got Eric um Eric Stoltz in it, and the guys are driving around in a Renault, sort of Renault, like Volkswagen GTI type vehicle, and they're driving around like it's just sex, drugs, and violence in the movie. They're robbing banks and they have masks on, and it's ultra violence. So that's a movie that people should check out. That's kind of like that. I don't know how do we get on this? The characters in Funny Games, by the way, are dressed like one in the latest Stranger Things series, right? They're all in the white, like that. Or like they're dressed like Hannibal Lecter in Manhunter. So anyway, so you can check out those movies. Yes, those are great. Um, what else? Did I get all the super chats? Let me check on super chats here and make sure. Shouts out to everybody that supported me. Really appreciate you. Yes, and shouts out to let's see. Oh, that was the last time. Okay. So shouts out to everybody who supported me directly. Really, thank you so much. And yes, he's a smack dealer in the movie. And it's all about that. Of course, because it's Roger Avary, right? Who is put those elements into fiction. So yeah, so check those out. I can't think of any other movies that I want to see that have just come out. I watched John Wick 4. I didn't think John Wick 4 was great, obviously, because it's just too long. I mean, my dad pointed out, look, not everybody in Paris is part of the consortium or whatever, right? So yeah, I mean, that's a good point. It gets to be too much, the ritualized thing. I mean, they do have the Skarsgård character, like, on the sort of marble checkerboard floor, like with the duel about to be set up with the pyramid behind him. And Paris is one of those Luminate confirmed Uber cities. So there's an element to that, and then there's an element of, like John Wick, John Wick, the Christian versus the other guy who's the, Eastern guy or whatever. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, Blue Velvet is a totally whacked out movie. That's like another hyper violent movie in a different way. Right? Oh, oh. Speaking of There Will Be Blood, going back to the beginning of this, I will be doing a There Will Be Blood analysis at some point. I did actually DPH had brought that up. If you guys want to see me and David Patrick Harry do There Will Be Blood, that's a great movie to analyze, and you should sponsor a stream over there so we can do it together. But There Will Be Blood also is essentially um Standard Oil is coming after this guy, and he's going up against the Rockefeller proxies in the movie, but he's also playing he's like a voice actor avatar for John Huston, right? What so what you've got here is he's like, your land is wonderful, and my son HW and I have come here to speculate on the land and to quail hunt. Where did you come from? Baby in a basket. So I put my straw down here. It's called seepage, and the seepage comes out, and I drink your milkshake. You've abandoned my boy, abandoned my soy, my soy. Daniel Day Lewis is so good in that movie. My son HW and I have come here to quail hunt. Would you happen to have any water? It's just John Huston. Would you happen to have any water? We're going to make it all the way to California. The shipping costs, right? Daniel Day Lewis went to my drama school, and of course, Kieran Hines is in the movie playing his sidekick, and they have a Northern Irish connection, of course. Kieran Hines went to Queens, where I went to school. So anyway, that's about it for the stream. That was a lot of tangents. That was a lot of sort of disparate information. Hopefully, I um, brought it all together with some themes and motifs there. I think I did. But look, form plus content equals meaning. So there's a reason why I think it's important to do it live. We do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. Fucking thing sucks. I think it's important to do it live and to discuss these things with tangents and various offshoots and rabbit holes, because that's what's in the content. The content that mimics the content. So we have to talk about the things sort of in the fashion of the medium in which they're presented, and then bring them together in terms of worldview, paradigm, and theme, so we can discuss how form and content fuse together to create meaning. So there's a reason that I do that, right? There's a reason why I don't have everything scripted, and I'm not just like reading some sort of teleprompter script or so. I don't know what people want, but that's not what it is. Okay, and so there's a reason why I discuss the things and the method I do, because I think that that is appropriate for analysis of literature and film. That's the way that you do it. Now, of course, if it were written, look, I mean, my the teacher that I went to his retirement party, who taught for 51 years. Again, I'll say, like, he said that it's doesn't work. It doesn't make a difference unless it's written in terms of academia, certainly, right? But for us, in terms of our internet discussion, I think that that's appropriate. Otherwise, it would be a submitted paper or it would be a book, which that would be great. I would like to publish my book in the future, but that would be a novel. That would be a work of creative writing, not an analytical book. That's why I do this on the internet. So, so that's why I do this the way that I do. I hope that everybody can see that or appreciate that. Thank you, because I appreciate you. Thank you. I appreciate you for being here and for watching this. And we'll be back soon in the future. So to play us out, let's leave you with a cut off his new album. Let's leave you with my friend Rooks G here. Also, shouts out to iPack Arts over at Instagram who does the awesome thumbnails. And shouts out to all my friends and family out there. And let's leave you with a cut off of I'm gonna leave you with some Rooks G here, ROXG. And actually, I'm gonna drop you the link just so you can go to it. Please go to his channel if you have time, and hit that subscribe button and support my buddy here because he makes pretty dope music. And this is Rooks G with Operation Neptune, and he's gonna play us out. All right, everybody, thank you for being here. Love y'all. I'll see you. You can support me anytime. Give me donations anytime at the links provided in the video description or the channel description. Please turn on that notification bell. Please like and subscribe, share the channel. Trying to get our views up, you guys. You know, we've been going here for a year and a half, and so we're trying to get our views up. Please share this on platforms and let them know that we do literary analysis here. We do books, and everything is relevant and revelatory. And we also do films because that is the medium that's appropriate for right now. Video games are great. And that is sort of the medium for the future, and that's gonna be what film is in the future. But, film is still the medium for the masses, so that's what we are analyzing here. So it's important to do that, okay? So thank you, and we'll see you later. Let's go. Operation Neptune, let's go. Cheers. Peace.